Tonight we are going to talk about the most terrifying single creature in the Third Age of Middle-earth, and the reason he is terrifying has nothing to do with fire. You know the dragon. You know the image, the vast red golden bulk coiled on the mountain of treasure, the eyes like furnaces, the voice like smoke given language. You know the scenes, the riddles in the dark chamber, the death fall over Lake Town, the arrow that finds the one bare spot in the diamond waistcoat. Smaug is one of the most iconic monsters in the history of fantasy literature, and most people think they know his story. They do not. Most people know the end of Smaug's story, the part with the Hobbit, the part with the treasure, the part where Bard's black arrow finds the gap in the armor and the dragon falls flaming into the long lake. But Smaug's story does not begin with Bilbo Baggins. Smaug's story begins centuries earlier, in the deep places of the world, in the specific quality of ancient evil that Tolkien understood better than almost any other writer. The evil that is patient. The evil that waits. The evil that sleeps on its hoard for 200 years and wakes unchanged, because the evil has nowhere to go and nothing to become except more completely what it already is. Tonight, we tell the full story. From the dragon's origins in the deep north, through the destruction of the greatest dwarf kingdom in Middle-earth, through the 2 centuries of occupation, through the quest that ended the dragon and began the war. The complete history of Smaug, not just the monster, but the catastrophe. Not just the dragon, but the desolation. This one burns. Stay with me. Part 1. The last of the great dragons. Smaug was not the first dragon. Smaug was the last. This distinction matters enormously because it changes what Smaug means, changes the dragon from a random monster to a historical figure, from an isolated threat to the final expression of a tradition of evil that stretches back to the first age of the world. The dragons were created by Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, the original enemy, the being whose evil makes Sauron look like a middle manager. Morgoth bred the dragons in the pits of Angband during the First Age. Glorong was the first, the father of dragons, the great worm who walked on legs and burned the armies of the elves, and who was, in his time, the most devastating weapon in Morgoth's arsenal. After Glorong came others, and Calagon the Black, the greatest dragon who ever lived, the winged terror whose fall broke the towers of Thangorodrim at the end of the War of Wrath. The dragons of the First Age were weapons of mass destruction, living engines of fire and terror, deployed by Morgoth against the armies of the Elves and the Valar in the wars that shaped the earliest history of the world. The War of Wrath ended Morgoth's reign. The Valar themselves came to Middle-earth, fought Morgoth's armies, and cast the Dark Lord into the void. The dragons, Morgoth's greatest weapons, were mostly destroyed in the Cataclysm, and Calagon was killed. The great war dragons of the First Age were slain or scattered. But some survived. Some dragons escaped the destruction of the First Age and fled into the wastes of the north. The surviving dragons were diminished, smaller than Ancalagon, less powerful than Glorong, reduced from weapons of apocalyptic war to solitary predators haunting the northern mountains. But they were still dragons. Still fire drakes, still possessed of the specific quality of dragonish intelligence, dragonish greed, and dragonish malice that Morgoth had bred into them. Smaug was the last of these, the last great fire drake. The final expression of the First Age's most devastating weapon, surviving into the Third Age like a living fossil, an anachronism, a relic of an older and more terrible world, carrying the fire and the fury of Morgoth's breeding into an age that had largely forgotten what dragons could do. The last matters because it tells you what Smaug is, an ending, not a beginning. Smaug is not the herald of a new age of dragons. Smaug is the conclusion of the Dragon Age, the final chapter of a story that began with Glorong in the First Age and that ends with an arrow in a lake in the Third. Part 2. What a dragon is. Before we talk about what Smaug did, we need to talk about what a dragon is, because the what explains the how, and the how is more complex than most people realize. A dragon is not simply a large, fire-breathing lizard. A dragon, in Tolkien's mythology, is a specific kind of being, a being created by Morgoth through the corruption of existing things, the way all of Morgoth's creations are corruptions of existing things. The dragons are not natural creatures. They are manufactured, bred for war, designed for terror, engineered to serve the specific purpose of destroying the enemies of the Dark Lord. The engineering has several components. Fire. The fire drakes, the category of dragon that includes Smaug, breathe fire. Not decorative fire, not theatrical fire. The fire that a dragon breathes is the specific, industrial, city-destroying quality of fire that can melt metal, ignite stone, and reduce a dwarf kingdom to smoking ruin in a matter of hours. The fire is a weapon. The fire is the primary weapon. Armor. A dragon's hide is covered in scales, hard, jewel-like scales that function as natural armor. The scales are not uniform in quality or coverage. A dragon's underside is softer than its back. A dragon's belly, over time, acquires a secondary layer of protection. The gems and gold pieces that embed themselves in the softer scales through years of lying on treasure. Intelligence. Dragons are intelligent. Not animal intelligent, sapient intelligent. Dragons can speak. Dragons can reason. Dragons can manipulate, deceive, plot, and plan. The intelligence is not the warm, curious, exploratory intelligence of the hobbits or the elves. The intelligence is cold, calculating, and fundamentally oriented toward domination. The dragon's intelligence serves the dragon's purposes: the acquisition of treasure, the destruction of enemies, the maintenance of the dragon's supremacy. Greed, the dragon sickness, the specific, insatiable, pathological desire for gold and gems, is not a personality quirk. It is a feature, a built-in quality. Morgoth bred the greed into the dragons the way you breed aggression into fighting dogs, deliberately, purposefully, as a mechanism that serves the breeder's design. The greed keeps the dragons focused. The greed keeps the dragons motivated. The greed gives the dragons a purpose that does not depend on the Dark Lord's continued instruction. The greed is the dragon's leash. Not a physical leash. Morgoth does not control the dragons through direct command. The greed is the behavioral leash, the specific quality of compulsion that drives the dragons to behave in ways that serve Morgoth's purposes, even when Morgoth is no longer present to give orders. The dragons hoard gold. The hoarding deprives the free peoples of wealth. The deprivation weakens the free peoples. The weakening serves the Shadow's purposes. Smaug carries all of these qualities: fire, armor, intelligence, greed. But Smaug also carries something that the other surviving dragons of the Third Age do not: scale. Smaug is enormous, the largest dragon to appear in Middle-earth since the First Age. The size is not simply impressive. The size is the specific military quality that makes Smaug a strategic threat rather than a local nuisance. Part 2b. The Diamond Waistcoat. The armor that protects Smaug is not simply the natural scales. Over 2 centuries of lying on the treasure, the softer scales of the dragon's underside have been embedded with gems and gold fragments that have been pressed into the flesh by the dragon's weight. The result is the diamond waistcoat, the layer of treasure armor that covers the dragon's belly, and that Smaug displays to Bilbo with the specific, preening quality of a being who considers himself invulnerable. The diamond waistcoat is wealth as armor. The treasure that the dragon hoards also protects the dragon. The gold and gems lying beneath the dragon's body have been incorporated into the dragon's defensive system. The treasure is not just the dragon's possession. The treasure is the dragon's protection. The implication is disturbing. The dragon is armored by his greed. The more the dragon hoards, the thicker the armor. The longer the dragon lies on the gold, the more completely the gold integrates into the dragon's defenses. The hoarding is not just accumulation, it is fortification. The greed produces the protection that sustains the greed. But the armor has a gap. The one spot, the left breast, the bare patch, is the spot where the gems did not adhere. The spot where the dragon's armor failed to fully form. The vulnerability that the vanity reveals and that the arrow exploits. The gap is the greed's failure. The greed that produced the diamond waistcoat was not quite complete. The greed that armored the dragon left one spot unprotected. And the one unprotected spot is the spot where the death enters. The symbolism is precise. The greed protects almost completely. The greed covers almost everything. The greed makes the dragon almost invulnerable. Almost. The almost is the gap. And the gap kills the dragon. The greed that was supposed to protect the dragon is the greed that produces the false confidence that prevents the dragon from guarding the one spot that the greed did not cover. The diamond waistcoat is the visual metaphor for the relationship between greed and vulnerability. The greed covers the dragon in jewels. The jewels make the dragon feel invulnerable. The feeling of invulnerability prevents the dragon from addressing the one real vulnerability. The greed produces the confidence. The confidence produces the blindness. The blindness produces the death. The armor is the greed. The gap is the greed's limit. And the arrow, finding the gap, is the demonstration that greed, however extensive, however comprehensive, however close to total, is never total enough. Part 2c. The fire within. The fire that Smaug breathes is not ordinary fire. Dragon fire is the specific, Morgoth-bred, supernaturally enhanced quality of flame that operates on a different order of magnitude from any fire that the mortal world produces. Dragon fire can melt the rings of power, the lesser ones at least. This detail, established in The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf explains that dragon fire consumed 4 of the 7 dwarf rings, tells you something about the temperature and the quality of the fire that Smaug produces. The rings of power were forged in the supernaturally enhanced fires of Erebor and Mordor. The rings are not ordinary metal. The rings cannot be destroyed by ordinary fire. But dragon fire can destroy the lesser ones, the 7, and likely the 9. Only the One Ring is beyond even Dragonfire's reach. Dragonfire is hotter than the forges of the elves, hotter than any mortal flame. The only fire in Middle-earth that surpasses it is the volcanic furnace of Orodruin, Mount Doom, where the One Ring was forged and where only the One Ring can be unmade. Dragonfire can destroy the lesser rings of power, but not the one. Smaug's fire sits just below the threshold of the divine, the most devastating non-volcanic fire in Middle-earth, capable of unmaking things that were forged with supernatural craft. The fire is inside the dragon. The dragon carries the fire within its body, in the furnace that the dragon's anatomy contains, in the specific, biological, Morgoth-engineered quality of internal combustion that makes the dragon a living weapon. The fire is not exhaled, it is projected. The dragon does not simply breathe fire the way a person breathes air. The dragon generates fire, produces it internally, stores it, and releases it in controlled bursts that can be aimed, sustained, and modulated according to the dragon's intent. The fire is Smaug's identity. The dragon is defined by the fire more than by any other quality. The intelligence, the greed, the armor, all of these are important. But the fire is the thing that makes the dragon the dragon. Remove the fire, and the dragon is a large, intelligent, greedy lizard. The fire is the quality that elevates the dragon from a creature to a force, from a being to a catastrophe. The fire goes out when Smaug dies. The fire that has been burning inside the dragon for centuries, the internal furnace, the Morgoth-bred combustion, is extinguished by the arrow and the water. The fire that could melt the lesser rings of power is quenched by the long lake. The most powerful non-volcanic fire in Middle-earth goes out in a splash. Part 3. The Grey Mountains and the Dragon Wars. Before Smaug came to Erebor, the dwarves and the dragons had a history. The history is the context that makes Smaug's attack on Erebor something more than an isolated event, makes it the culmination of a long-running conflict between the dwarves' desire for wealth and the dragons' desire for the same. The dwarves of Durin's folk, the specific lineage that includes Thorin Oakenshield and his ancestors, had a long and painful relationship with dragons. In the Third Age, Durin's folk established themselves in the Grey Mountains, the Ered Mithrin, the mountain range north of Mirkwood, and built great halls there, mining the mountains for the metals and gems that the dwarvish economy depended on. The Grey Mountains attracted dragons. The wealth that the dwarves were pulling from the mountains, the gold, the silver, the gems, was exactly the kind of hoard that the dragons bred in greed was calibrated to detect. The dragons came down from the further north. The dragons attacked the dwarf halls, and the dragon wars of the Grey Mountains began. The dragon wars were devastating. The dwarves fought. The dwarves lost. The specific quality of dragonfire, the industrial, metal-melting, stone-cracking quality of the fire drake's primary weapon, was something that dwarvish engineering could not fully defend against. The dwarves could build walls. The dragon could melt them. The dwarves could forge armor. The dragon could ignite the wearers. King Din I of Durin's folk was killed by a cold drake at the gates of his own hall in the year 2589 of the Third Age. The killing of the king broke the dwarves' will to remain in the Grey Mountains. The decision was made: Durin's folk would leave the Grey Mountains, would abandon the halls their ancestors had built, would retreat from the dragons and find a new home. The retreat from the Grey Mountains is the specific, historically proximate cause of the settlement of Erebor. The dwarves left the Grey Mountains because the dragons made the Grey Mountains uninhabitable. The dwarves went south. Some went to the Iron Hills under Din Once's son, Grar. Others, under Din Once's other son, Thrar, went to the Lonely Mountain, to Erebor. Part 4. The Kingdom Under the Mountain. Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, was not a new discovery. The dwarves of Durin's folk had known about Erebor for centuries. The mountain had been mined before, in earlier eras, and the dwarves knew what lay inside: veins of gold, seams of precious metals, and the specific quality of geological wealth that dwarvish prospecting had identified as one of the richest mineral deposits in the northern world. Thrur took his people to Erebor. The dwarves of Durin's folk, the refugees from the Grey Mountains, the survivors of the Dragon Wars, came to the Lonely Mountain and began to build. What they built was extraordinary. Erebor under Thrur became the greatest dwarf kingdom still active in Middle-earth. The closest thing the Third Age had seen to the legendary glory of Cassard DM in its prime. The dwarves carved the mountain hollow, carved halls and corridors and vast chambers from the living rock, carved the specific dwarvish quality of underground architecture that combines engineering precision with aesthetic grandeur. The wealth was staggering. The mines of Erebor produced gold in quantities that exceeded anything the dwarves had found in the Grey Mountains. The forges of Erebor produced works of craft that were famous across Middle-earth: weapons, armor, jewelry, objects of beauty and function that the human and elvish markets paid enormous sums for. The dwarvish economy boomed. Trade flowed through the lonely mountain. The city of Dale, built on Erebor's doorstep by the men of the region, thrived on the trade that the mountain generated. The Arkenstone was found. The heart of the mountain, the most beautiful gem ever discovered by dwarvish miners. The great white jewel that shone with its own light was found deep in Erebor's mines and brought to Thrur, who claimed it as the heirloom of his house. The Arkenstone became the symbol of the kingdom, the specific, physical, luminous expression of Erebor's wealth and Erebor's glory. Erebor was a beacon. The mountain's wealth drew traders from across Middle-earth. The mountain's strength drew allies. The mountain's reputation drew admiration. For decades, Erebor was the center of the northern world, the economic engine that powered the commerce of the lands between the Misty Mountains and the Iron Hills. And Erebor was a target. The same qualities that made the kingdom great, the wealth, the fame, the specific quality of concentrated, displayed, loudly announced prosperity, made the kingdom visible, made the kingdom desirable, made the kingdom the specific kind of prize that a dragon's greed is calibrated to detect. The wealth of Erebor sang in the specific subterranean geological frequency that dragons can hear across hundreds of miles. The gold in the mountain called to the fire in the north, and the fire answered. Part 5. What Thur built, and what Thur invited. Thur's achievement was real. Let me not diminish it. The kingdom that Thur built in Erebor was a genuine, extraordinary, historically significant accomplishment. The dwarves who followed Thrur from the Grey Mountains were refugees, a displaced people fleeing dragonfire, looking for a new home. Thur gave them one, built them one, created a kingdom that exceeded anything the refugees had lost. But Thrur's achievement was also Thur's trap. The very success of the kingdom, the wealth, the fame, the beauty, was the thing that attracted the dragon. The thing that Thrur built was the thing that Smaug wanted. The kingdom's glory was the kingdom's death sentence. Thur was not ignorant of the risk. The dwarves of Durin's folk knew about dragons. They had been driven from their previous home by dragons. They understood, at the institutional level, that accumulated wealth in a mountain kingdom attracts the specific kind of predator that accumulated wealth in a mountain kingdom attracts. But Thrur built anyway, mined anyway, displayed the wealth anyway. And the building and mining and displaying, the specific quality of dwarvish civilization that says, we will not hide what we have made. We will not diminish our craft. We will not live in fear of the things that might come for us. This quality is both the dwarves' greatest virtue and their most dangerous vulnerability. The dwarves build. The building attracts. The attraction produces destruction. The destruction produces exile. The exile produces the desire to build again. The cycle repeats. Grey Mountains to Erebor, to exile to the quest for Erebor. And the repetition is the dwarvish condition. The people who cannot stop building, even when the building creates the conditions for the building's destruction. Thrur, specifically, was showing signs of the dragon sickness before the dragon arrived. This is a detail that changes the moral complexity of the Erebor story. Thur was becoming obsessed with the treasure. The Arkenstone consumed him. The gold consumed him. The specific quality of possessive, hoarding, mine obsession that the dragon's sickness produces was appearing in Thurah, appearing in the Dwarf King before the dragon came, before the treasure was lost, before the exile began. The dragon's sickness and the dragon, they share a quality. The greed that Morgoth bred into the dragons is the same greed that the proximity to dragon gold produces in mortals. The dragon's greed and the dwarf's greed are the same greed, the same pathological, possessive, never satisfied desire for more, for everything, for the specific quality of complete ownership that no mortal being can achieve. Thrur was becoming dragon like before the dragon arrived. The dragon's sickness was transforming the Dwarf King into a being whose relationship with the treasure mirrored the dragon's relationship with the hoard. The king was becoming the thing that would destroy his kingdom. Part 6. The Coming of Smaug. The year was 2770 of the Third Age. Smaug came from the north. The coming was not a surprise, or rather, the coming should not have been a surprise. The dwarves knew about dragons, knew the dragons were in the north, knew that the wealth of Erebor was the specific kind of target that dragons seek. The dwarves should have been prepared. They were not because they were foolish, because the preparation that would have been necessary was the preparation that the dwarvish culture could not produce. The preparation that would have saved Erebor was the preparation to hide the wealth, to diminish the display, to make the kingdom less visible, less desirable, less obviously rich. The dwarves could not do this, could not hide their wealth any more than a dragon could stop hoarding it. The display was the identity. The craft was the culture. The visible, loudly announced, proudly exhibited quality of dwarvish wealth was not a choice. It was the dwarvish character expressed as architecture and economics. Hide the wealth, and you hide the dwarves. Diminish the display, and you diminish the people. Smaug came from the north, came down from the withered heath, the specific desolate region in the far north where the surviving dragons had been breeding since the end of the First Age. Came south, following the call of the gold. Came to Erebor. The approach was visible. A dragon the size of Smaug does not travel in secret. The creature's wing beats would have been audible for miles. The shadow would have darkened the ground beneath it. The specific visual quality of a great fire drake in flight, the vast red golden body, the wings that span hundreds of feet, the trail of smoke and sparks, would have been visible to every being between the withered heath and the lonely mountain. The dwarves saw Smaug coming, had time, not much, but some, to realize what was approaching, had time to understand that the thing they had feared, the thing their grandparents had fled, the thing that had driven them from the grey mountains a century and a half earlier, that thing was here, was coming, was approaching Erebor with the specific, purposeful, prey-focused quality of a predator that has found what it has been looking for. And then, the fire. Part 7. The Fall of Erebor. The attack was devastating, and the devastation was fast. Not the slow, siege-based, weeks of grinding pressure quality of warfare that mortal armies produce. The fast, overwhelming resistance is pointless quality of destruction that a single, overwhelmingly powerful being can inflict when no defense against it exists. Smaug's fire hit the mountain, hit the front gate, the great entrance to Erebor, the architecturally magnificent doorway that was both the kingdom's pride and its vulnerability. The fire was not ordinary fire, dragon fire, the specific Morgoth bread. Supernaturally intense quality of flame that a great fire drake produces was hotter than any forge, more destructive than any siege weapon, more overwhelming than any military instrument that the dwarves had ever faced. The front gate melted. The stone around it cracked. The mountain's entrance, the specific, engineered, supposedly impregnable point of access that the dwarves had designed to withstand any assault, was breached in minutes by a force that the engineers had not designed for. Smaug entered the mountain, entered through the ruined gate, filled the corridors with fire. The dwarves who were in the upper halls, the warriors, the guards, the specific military personnel who were supposed to defend the kingdom, those dwarves died. Died in the fire. Died in the corridors. Died in the specific, horrible, no-escape quality of death that comes from being in a confined space when a dragon breathes fire into it. The lower halls fell next. Smaug drove deeper into the mountain, following the gold the way a hound follows a scent. The dragon did not need to search. The dragon could feel the treasure, could sense the gold's specific quality of weight and density, could navigate the mountain's corridors by the pull of the hoard. The treasury. The vast chamber where Erebor's accumulated wealth was stored. The gold, the gems, the mithril, the Arkenstone, the works of craft that generations of dwarvish miners and smiths had produced. The treasury was the destination. The treasury was the target. Everything else, the gates, the halls, the corridors, the dwarves themselves, was obstacles between the dragon and the gold. Smaug reached the treasury, and the dragon settled onto the hoard. The vast body, the hundreds of feet of scaled, armored, supernaturally durable flesh coiled onto the gold. The wings folded, the eyes closed. The fire banked to embers. The dragon was home. Part 7b. The night Erebor fell. Let me slow the narrative down and place you in the mountain on the night the dragon came, because the speed of the destruction conceals the specific human quality of the experience. Inside Erebor, in the hour before Smaug arrived, there was a civilization functioning. Dwarves were working in the forges. Dwarves were eating their evening meal. Dwarf children were sleeping in their chambers deep in the mountain. The first sign was the sound. Not the dragon itself, the sound of the Dale bells. The warning bells ringing frantically. The specific acoustic quality of alarm that penetrates stone walls and says, something is coming now. The dwarves would have mobilized, would have done what dwarves do when the alarm sounds, armed themselves, gathered their families, moved toward the defensive positions. The dwarves were not helpless, were not caught completely unaware. The dwarves had time to realize what was happening. The time made it worse. Long enough to understand, but too short to act. Long enough to see the fire approaching through the front gate. Too short to organize an evacuation. Long enough to pick up a child, but too short to reach the back door. The dwarves knew what was coming. Knew they could not stop it. Knew that the minutes remaining were insufficient for the things the minutes needed to contain. The fire came through the corridors the way water comes through a broken dam. The front gate failed, and the fire filled the entrance halls with the specific, hydraulic quality of a fluid filling a container. Thorin was a young dwarf on the night Erebor fell. 24 years old, barely an adult by dwarvish reckoning, old enough to understand the catastrophe but too young to have known any other home. The experience imprinted permanently, became the formative event of Thorin's life. Thorin remembers the fire, remembers the smell, the acrid, metal and stone quality of dragonfire. Remembers the sound, the roar, the collapse of stonework, the screams. Remembers the heat. Thorin escaped with his grandfather and father through the secret door. fled out of his home into the night air on the mountain's western face. And Thorin looked back and saw the fire pouring from the front gate like lava from a volcano, lighting the night sky, illuminating Dale, which was already burning. Thorin was a young dwarf, looking at the destruction of his world. And the young dwarf became the prince, and the prince became the exile, and the exile became the king who would spend his life trying to undo what he had witnessed that night. That image, the fire, the mountain, the world ending, is the image that drives every decision Thorin makes for the next 170 years. Part 7c. The Shame of the Elves. The elves of the woodland realm were nearby when Smaug attacked Erebor. Thranduil, the Elven King, was aware of the attack, was in a position to help. Thranduil did not help. The Elven King, who could have sent his warriors to support the dwarves, who could have provided shelter for the refugees, Thranduil did nothing. The elvish army marched to the borders of the desolation, saw the dragon's fire, and turned back. The refusal is the wound that does not heal, the specific, unforgotten, unforgiven quality of abandonment that defines Thorin's relationship with the elves for the rest of his life. The dwarves needed help. The elves refused. And the refusal, the calculated decision to let the dwarves die rather than risk elvish lives against a dragon, is the betrayal that Thorin carries across 2 centuries. Thranduil had reasons. The dragon was too powerful, the risk too great, the probability of elvish casualties too high. The Elven King made a rational calculation that the cost of intervention exceeded the benefit. The calculation was rational. The calculation was also morally wrong. Wrong in the specific quality that results when rational calculation is applied to a situation that demands irrational generosity. The situation called for help. The refusal, however rational, was a failure of courage. Thorin never forgives. When Thorin refuses to deal with Thranduil after the dragon's death, when Thorin chooses war over negotiation, the refusal is driven not only by the dragon's sickness, but by this memory. The memory of the night the dragon came, and the elves stood by and watched. Part 7d. The Secret Door's Other Purpose. The secret door that saved Thorin's family was designed for more than escape. The secret door was designed for return. The dwarvish engineers who built Erebor included the secret door as a re-entry point, a hidden passage through which the rightful owners could return if the mountain was ever lost. The door was the engineers' act of faith, the faith that the dwarves would come back, that whatever catastrophe might drive them from their home, they would eventually return, and when they returned, they would need a way in that the occupier did not know about. The key and the map, the 2 objects that the quest depends on, are the engineer's gift to the future. The key opens the door. The map shows the location. The 2 objects, passed from generation to generation across the centuries of exile, are the physical connection between the catastrophe and the return. The door is the engineering of hope, the structural expression of the faith that the exile is not permanent. The dwarvish quality of building for the future applied to the terrible scenario of dragon attack. The engineers were right. The door was needed. The door was used. The engineering of hope produced the structural means by which the hope was fulfilled. Part 8. The Destruction of Dale. Erebor was not the only thing Smaug destroyed that day. Dale, the human city at the mountain's foot, the trading town that had grown rich on the commerce that flowed through Erebor, Dale was destroyed too. Dale was collateral damage. Or rather, Dale was the next course. The dragon had taken the mountain. The dragon had the treasure. The dragon's primary objective was achieved. But Dale was there, was adjacent, was populated, was made of flammable material, and the dragon was not finished burning. Smaug came out of the mountain, came through the ruined gate, came into the air above Dale, and breathed. Dale burned the wooden buildings, the market stalls, the homes and the workshops and the specific civilian infrastructure of a prosperous trading town. All of it burned. The fire from above, the dragon circling, breathing, the fire falling on the city like rain from a volcano. The fire consumed Dale in hours. The people of Dale died. Not all of them. Some escaped. Some fled south toward the Long Lake. Some survived through the specific quality of luck and speed that allows some people to escape catastrophes that kill others. But many died. The Lord of Dale was killed. The warriors who tried to fight, who tried to shoot arrows at the dragon, who tried to bring the creature down with the human weapons that were all they had, those warriors died. Girion, Lord of Dale, is said to have shot arrows at Smaug. Black arrows, the great war arrows of Dale, forged by dwarvish smiths, the specific quality of arrowcraft that represented the best that human bowmanship and dwarvish metallurgy could produce. Girion shot. The arrows struck. The arrows bounced off the dragon's armor, bounced off the scales that covered Smaug's body, the natural armor that no arrow could penetrate. Except, and this is the detail that echoes across 2 centuries, except that one of Girion's arrows may have found a weak spot, may have loosened a scale, may have created the specific, tiny, barely perceptible gap in the dragon's armor that would, 200 years later, be the death of the beast. The black arrow that killed Smaug, the arrow that Bard shot into the dragon's belly, found a gap that Girion's arrows may have created. The death of Smaug, 2 centuries after the fall of Dale, may have been made possible by the fight that Girion fought and lost on the day that Dale was destroyed. The echo across 2 centuries is the specific quality of the Smaug story that Tolkien handles with characteristic precision. The present is shaped by the past. The victory in Laketown is made possible by the defeat in Dale. The arrow that kills the dragon finds the gap that a previous arrow made. The ending is connected to the beginning by the specific, material, physically present thread of an arrow wound in a dragon's belly. Part 9. The Refugees. The fall of Erebor produced refugees. 2 streams of refugees, one dwarvish, one human, fleeing the destruction, carrying nothing except what they could carry, moving away from the mountain that had been their home. The dwarves of Erebor fled in disarray. Thrur, the king, the builder, the being whose obsession with the treasure had contributed to the kingdom's vulnerability, Thrur escaped through a secret door. A back entrance. The hidden passage that the dwarves had built into the mountain's design. The emergency exit that the engineers had included as a contingency against exactly the kind of catastrophe that had just occurred. The secret door saved Thra, saved Thryn, Thrur's son, saved Thorin, Thryn's son, the young dwarf prince who would, nearly 2 centuries later, lead the quest to reclaim the mountain. The secret door saved the royal line. But the secret door did not save the people. The bulk of Erebor's population, the miners, the smiths, the merchants, the families, the specific, ordinary, non-royal population of a thriving dwarf kingdom. Those dwarves escaped through other routes, or did not escape at all. The refugees who survived were a fraction of the population that had lived in Erebor. The rest were dead. Burned, crushed, killed in the specific, indiscriminate, total quality of destruction that a dragon inflicts. The human refugees from Dale fled south, fled to the Long Lake, fled to the settlement that would eventually become Laketown, Esgaroth, the town built on the water. The specific quality of human habitation that puts a lake between itself and the mountain where the dragon lives. Lake Town was built on water because water does not burn. The lesson of Dale's destruction, the lesson that a dragon's fire can consume any structure built on land, was learned by the refugees who settled on the lake. The pilings, the platforms, the specific quality of aquatic architecture that makes Lake Town distinctive, all of this is the architectural expression of a people who have been burned once and who have arranged their lives to avoid being burned again. The refugees carry the memory. The dwarves carry the memory of Erebor, the halls, the treasure, the specific quality of dwarvish civilization that the dragon destroyed. The men carry the memory of Dale, the town, the trade, the specific quality of human prosperity that the dragon ended. Both communities define themselves by what they lost. Both communities organize their identities around the catastrophe, around the day the dragon came and the world they knew was destroyed. Thorin grows up in exile. The young prince, who was a child when the dragon came, who was carried from the mountain by his grandfather, who lost his home before he was old enough to properly understand what home meant. Thorin grows up as a refugee, as a displaced person, as a prince without a kingdom, carrying the memory of a place he barely knew and the desire to return to a place he barely remembers. Part 10. The Long Exile. The exile of Durin's folk lasted nearly 200 years. 2 centuries. The specific, generational, culture-shaping span of time that transforms a catastrophe into an identity and a memory into a mythology. During the exile, the dwarves wandered. Thrur went to Moria. Went back to the ancestral home of Durin's folk, the great underground city that had been abandoned when the Balrog was awakened. Thrur entered Moria alone and was killed by the orc chieftain Azog. Killed and desecrated, his head carved with Azog's name, his body thrown to the crows, the specific quality of deliberate humiliation that is designed to provoke rather than to conclude. The provocation worked. Thrinn, Thrur's son, Thorin's father, led the war of the dwarves and orcs. The war raged across the misty mountains for years. The war culminated in the Battle of Azanulbasar, at the gates of Moria, the terrible, devastating Pyrrhic victory that destroyed the orcs but cost the dwarves so many lives that the victory felt like defeat. Thorin earned his name at Azanulbasar. Oakenshield, the name that Thorin carries through The Hobbit, was earned in the battle, when the young prince used an oaken branch as a shield after his own shield was broken. The name is the battle's memory carried in the prince's identity, the specific, dwarvish quality of earning your name through combat rather than through birth. After the war, the dwarves scattered further. Thrinn disappeared, wandered into the wild, driven by the ring of power he carried, one of the 7 dwarf rings, captured by Sauron's agents, imprisoned in Dol Guldur, stripped of his ring, left to die in the dark. Thrinn's disappearance left Thorin as the leader of Durin's folk, the king in exile, the prince without a kingdom, the refugee who carried the memory of Erebor and the desire to reclaim it. Thorin settled in the Blue Mountains, in the Ered Luin, the Western Mountains, far from Erebor. Thorin and his people, the remnant of Durin's folk, the survivors of the dragon and the war and the exile, built a settlement in the Blue Mountains and tried to make a life. The life was adequate, not glorious, not the life that Erebor had provided, not the great halls, not the vast treasury, not the specific quality of dwarvish civilization at its peak. The Blue Mountains settlement was a functional community, a place to live, a place to work, a place where Thorin could maintain the lineage and the tradition while the years passed and the memory of Erebor dimmed in everyone's mind except his own. Thorin never forgot, never stopped thinking about the mountain, never stopped wanting to go back. The desire to reclaim Erebor, the desire that would eventually produce the quest, that would recruit the 13 dwarves and the wizard and the hobbit. That desire burned in Thorin across the decades of exile, the way Smaug's fire burned in the mountain across the same decades. Two fires, Thorin's desire and Smaug's occupation. Both burning, both sustained by the same treasure, both defining their bearer's identity. The exile and the dragon, separated by hundreds of miles, connected by the gold that one lost and the other possesses. Part 10b. Thorin's obsession. Thorin's desire to reclaim Erebor is not simply homesickness. The desire is more complex than that, is more dangerous, more obsessive, more structurally similar to the dragon sickness than Thorin would have been comfortable admitting. Thorin does not simply want to go home. Thorin wants to reclaim what was taken. The distinction matters because the two desires produce different behaviors. The desire to go home produces the journey. The desire to reclaim produces the war. The desire to go home is satisfied by arrival. The desire to reclaim is satisfied only by possession, by the specific, complete, legally and physically established quality of ownership that says, "This is mine again." The desire to reclaim is the mirror of the dragon's desire to possess. The dragon took the treasure from the dwarves. Thorin wants to take the treasure back. The dragon's taking was motivated by greed. Thorin's taking back is motivated by justice, or by what Thorin calls justice, which is the desire to reclaim expressed in the language of rights and inheritance. But the justice and the greed produce the same behavior. The dragon sits on the gold and refuses to share. Thorin, when he reaches the gold, sits on it and refuses to share. The behavior is identical. The motivation is different. The dragon is greedy, Thorin is righteous, but the behavior, seen from the outside, is the same. The similarity between Thorin's reclamation and Smaug's possession is the Hobbit's darkest insight. The victim, reclaiming what was taken, can become the victimizer. The being who was wronged, pursuing justice, can become the being who wrongs others. The specific quality of "I want what is mine" can transform from a legitimate grievance into an illegitimate obsession, and the transformation happens so gradually that the being experiencing it does not notice. Thorin does not notice, does not see himself becoming the dragon, does not recognize the specific, behavioral, posture and attitude similarities between the exile king sitting on the reclaimed treasure and the fire drake sitting on the stolen treasure. The blindness is the sickness. The sickness prevents the sufferer from seeing the sickness. Part 10c. The journey to Erebor. The journey from the Shire to the Lonely Mountain takes months. The journey crosses the breadth of northern Middle-earth, from the westernmost settled lands to the eastern reaches, from the comfortable Hobbit country to the desolate dragon country. The journey is not simply a geographic transition. It is a psychological transition. A slow, progressive, accumulating darkness quality of movement from the safe to the dangerous, from the known to the unknown, from the world where dragons are stories to the world where dragons are real. The stages of the journey correspond to the stages of the company's education. The trolls teach the company that danger is real. The misty mountains teach the company that the wild is hostile. The goblin tunnels teach the company that evil has organization. Mirkwood teaches the company that beauty and danger coexist. The Elven King's halls teach the company that allies can be obstacles. Laketown teaches the company that politics complicates everything. Each stage strips away a layer of the company's naivety. The company that arrives at Erebor is not the company that left the Shire. The dwarves are harder. Bilbo is smarter. The specific quality of comfortable, we can handle this confidence that the company carried out of Bag End has been replaced by the specific, harder. We have survived this quality of tested endurance. The journey to Erebor is the journey toward the dragon, and the dragon is present in the journey even before the dragon is visible. The dragon is the destination. The dragon is the purpose. The dragon is the specific, unnamed, present in every decision quality of fear that shapes the company's behavior from the Shire to the mountain. The company does not discuss the dragon. Not much. Not in the specific, detailed, let us plan how to fight the dragon quality of strategic discussion that the situation demands. The dragon is the conversation they do not have. The dragon is the thing they know they must face and that they avoid thinking about until the mountain is in sight and the avoidance is no longer possible. The avoidance is human. The avoidance is the specific, psychological, self-protective quality of not thinking about the terrible thing that allows people to function in the face of known danger. The company avoids thinking about the dragon because thinking about the dragon would paralyze them. The company avoids planning for the dragon because planning for the dragon would require confronting the reality that the dragon cannot be fought, cannot be defeated by 13 dwarves and a hobbit, cannot be overcome by any combination of dwarvish weapons and hobbit cleverness that the company possesses. The company's plan for the dragon is send the burglar. This is not a plan. This is an admission that no plan exists, that the company's strategy for dealing with the most dangerous creature in the Third Age consists entirely of sending the least qualified member of the company into the creature's lair and hoping for the best. The hope works. The hope is fulfilled, not through strength, not through strategy, but through the specific quality of providence that Tolkien's mythology consistently identifies as the force that guides the free peoples through the dangers that their own capabilities cannot overcome. Part 10D. What the Dwarves Sang. The dwarves' song in Bag End, far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, is the emotional foundation of the entire quest, and the song's content tells you everything about the dwarves' relationship with the dragon and the treasure. The song is about loss, about the fire that took the mountain, about the gold that the dragon possesses, about the desire to reclaim what was stolen. The song is the exile's anthem, the specific, musical, emotionally concentrated expression of the desire to go home. The song affects Bilbo, the hobbit, who has no stake in the treasure, who has no ancestral claim on the mountain, who has no personal relationship with the dragon. The hobbit hears the song and is moved. Not by the treasure, by the grief, the specific, emotional, musically expressed quality of the dwarves' loss touches something in the hobbit that the hobbit did not know was there. The capacity for empathy with a grief that is not his own. The song recruits Bilbo, not the contract, not the payment, the song. The emotional content of the dwarves' loss, transmitted through the music, reaches the hobbit's heart and creates the specific quality of I want to help that motivates the hobbit's agreement to join the quest. The song is the quest's origin, not the meeting with Gandalf, not the contract, the song. The dwarves' grief, expressed in music, heard by a hobbit, creating the emotional connection that makes the quest possible. The dragon's destruction of Erebor, remembered in song, produces the empathy that recruits the burglar who will discover the dragon's weakness. The chain, the dragon destroys Erebor. The destruction produces grief. The grief produces the song, The song produces the empathy. The empathy produces the burglar. The burglar produces the information. The information produces the killing. The killing begins with the song. Part 11. Smaug in the Mountain. While Thorin wandered in exile, Smaug lay in Erebor. And the 2 centuries of lying on the hoard, motionless, sleepless, the vast body coiled on the gold in the dark, is one of the most psychologically complex portraits of evil in the mythology. Smaug does not use the treasure. This is the specific, essential, defining quality of the dragon's hoarding. The treasure is not used. The gold is not spent. The gems are not displayed. The works of craft are not appreciated. The treasure, the accumulated wealth of the greatest dwarf kingdom in Middle-earth, the product of centuries of mining and smithcraft and artistic achievement, the treasure is sat upon. The dragon treats the treasure the way a dragon treats everything, as a possession, not a resource, not a tool, not a thing to be used for any purpose beyond the possessing itself. The gold has no value to Smaug except the value of being Smaug's. The gems have no beauty for Smaug except the beauty of belonging to Smaug. The treasure's function is to be hoarded. Period. The hoarding is the greed made structural. The dragon does not hoard because the dragon wants something that the treasure can buy. The dragon hoards because the hoarding is the dragon's purpose. The specific, Morgoth-bred, genetically embedded purpose that drives the dragon's behavior in the absence of any other motivation. Smaug, lying in the dark, on the gold, is the purest expression of possession without purpose. The dragon has everything and does nothing with it. The dragon's existence in Erebor is the existence of a being whose only activity is the maintenance of ownership, whose only occupation is the defense of a hoard that the dragon does not use. But Smaug is not passive. Smaug is alert. The dragon sleeps lightly, or does not truly sleep at all. The dragon's awareness of the hoard is constant. The dragon knows every piece of the treasure, every gold coin, every gem, every cup and plate and ring and sword and piece of jewelry that the dwarves accumulated across centuries of work. Tolkien is specific about this. Smaug knows the hoard, knows it intimately, knows it the way a miser knows his money, piece by piece, coin by coin. With the specific quality of granular awareness that comes from obsessive attention to the thing possessed. When Bilbo steals the cup, the single, small, golden cup that the Hobbit takes from the hoard as proof of his burglary, Smaug knows. Immediately, the dragon knows that one cup is missing from the hoard of millions. The awareness is not approximate. The awareness is exact. The dragon can detect the absence of a single item from a treasure that would take a mortal being years to inventory. The awareness is the greed made perceptual. The dragon's senses are calibrated to the hoard. The dragon's attention is focused on the treasure with the specific, pathological, total quality of focus that the dragon sickness produces. The dragon does not merely possess the treasure. The dragon perceives the treasure, perceives it constantly, perceives it totally, perceives every change in the hoard's composition with the specific, hair-trigger sensitivity of a being whose entire existence is organized around the maintenance of the possession. Part 12. The Desolation. The territory around Erebor, the specific geographic region that the dragon's presence affects, is called the Desolation of Smaug. The name tells you what the dragon has done to the landscape. The desolation is not natural wasteland. The desolation is the specific dragon-produced quality of devastation that results from a dragon's sustained presence in a region. The trees are dead. The grass is burned. The soil is scorched. The specific quality of the landscape around Erebor, the barren, Blasted. Nothing grows here. Quality of the terrain is the product of the dragon's fire, the dragon's poison, the dragon's specific quality of anti-life that radiates from the mountain like heat radiates from a furnace. The desolation extends for miles around the lonely mountain. The region that was once fertile, that supported Dale, that supported the farming communities that traded with the dwarves, the region is dead. Not just uninhabited, dead. The soil itself is poisoned. The water is contaminated. The specific quality of organic life that makes a landscape habitable has been extinguished by the dragon's presence. The desolation is the dragon's territory. Not claimed through law or treaty, claimed through destruction. The dragon does not govern the desolation. The dragon has killed the desolation. The territory is the dragon's because nothing else can survive in it, because the dragon's presence has made the landscape uninhabitable for every other form of life. The desolation extends Smaug's threat beyond the mountain. A dragon in a mountain is a local threat, dangerous to anyone who enters the mountain, but limited in scope to the mountain's interior. A dragon whose presence creates a miles-wide zone of destruction is a regional threat, a being whose mere existence transforms the landscape, kills the agriculture, and drives the population from the surrounding territory. The desolation is why Laketown exists where it does. The men who fled Dale settled on the Long Lake because the Long Lake was far enough from Erebor to be outside the desolation zone. The water, the specific quality of the lake's aquatic environment, provided both defense against the dragon's fire and distance from the dragon's anti-life presence. The desolation is also why the quest matters. The quest to reclaim Erebor is not simply a quest for treasure. The quest is a quest to end the desolation, to remove the dragon from the mountain and allow the landscape to recover, to allow Dale to be rebuilt, to allow the agriculture and the commerce and the specific quality of human and dwarvish civilization that the dragon's presence has destroyed to return. Part 13. Why Gandalf cared about the dragon. Gandalf's involvement in the quest for Erebor is not motivated by treasure. Gandalf does not care about gold. Gandalf's motivation is strategic, is driven by the specific, geopolitical, big-picture quality of thinking that the wizard brings to every situation. Gandalf is afraid of Smaug. Not personally afraid, Gandalf is not a being who experiences fear the way mortals do. Strategically afraid. Gandalf recognizes that Smaug represents a strategic threat to the entire Western Alliance, a threat that extends far beyond the destruction of Erebor and the desolation of the surrounding territory. The strategic threat is this: Sauron could use Smaug. Sauron, the Dark Lord, the necromancer of Dol Guldur, the specific quality of evil that is gathering strength in the east. Sauron could, if he chose, recruit Smaug. Could offer the dragon an alliance, could deploy the dragon against the free peoples the way Morgoth had deployed the dragons of the First Age against the elves. A dragon allied with Sauron would be catastrophic. Smaug, deployed against the northern kingdoms, against the remnants of Arna, against the woodmen of Mirkwood, against the dwarves and the men of the north, Smaug could destroy the entire northern defensive structure, could burn Dale a second time, could destroy Laketown, could devastate the lands between the Misty Mountains and the Iron Hills. And Smaug could do this quickly, not in the slow, grinding, years of campaign quality of warfare that mortal armies require. In days, possibly in hours. The dragon's speed, the dragon's fire, the dragon's specific quality of one being army of destruction, would allow Sauron to eliminate the northern free peoples faster than the northern free peoples could organize a defense. Gandalf sees this. Gandalf understands the strategic implications of a dragon sitting on the northern trade route, controlled by no one, available to the highest bidder, a weapon of mass destruction waiting to be deployed. Gandalf understands that Smaug must be removed, not because the treasure should be returned to the dwarves, but because the dragon's continued existence represents a strategic vulnerability in the Western Alliance's northern flank. The quest for Erebor is Gandalf's strategic operation. The treasure is the dwarves' motivation. The dragon's removal is Gandalf's motivation. The two motivations align. Both require entering the mountain and dealing with the dragon. But the motivations are different. And the difference is the specific quality of strategic thinking that Gandalf brings to the quest, and that the dwarves, focused on the treasure, do not fully appreciate. Part 13b. What Erebor means to the dwarves. The concept of home for the dwarves of Durin's folk is different from the concept of home for any other people in Middle-earth. For hobbits, home is comfort. For elves, home is memory. For men, home is heritage. For dwarves, home is a place of making. The home is not the mountain. The home is what the dwarves made inside the mountain. The halls they carved. The forges they built. The specific dwarvish quality of craft expressed as architecture that transforms dead stone into living space. Erebor is a mountain that the dwarves made. Every surface of Erebor's interior was shaped by dwarvish craft, the product of skilled, aesthetically driven labor that makes the dwarves who they are. Smaug's occupation is not simply the loss of a home. It is the loss of a making. The dragon sits on the product of centuries of dwarvish labor, and the sitting is an affront not just to ownership, but to craft. The dragon possesses the product of dwarvish making without understanding dwarvish making, has the gold without knowing how the gold was extracted, has the halls without knowing how the halls were carved, has the treasure without understanding the labor that created it. The dragon is the parasite on dwarvish craft, the being who consumes the product without participating in the production. This is why Thorin's desire to reclaim Erebor is not simply greed. The desire is also the craftsman's desire to recover the product of his people's labor. Not just the gold, but the making, the specific quality of dwarvish craft expressed as mountain that the dragon desecrates by treating as a bed rather than as a work of art. Part 13 sees Smaug among Tolkien's villains. Smaug occupies a unique position among Tolkien's villains. Morgoth is the cosmic villain, the fallen angel whose rebellion creates all subsequent evil. Sauron is the strategic villain, the Dark Lord, whose evil operates through organization and manipulation. Saruman is the intellectual villain, the fallen wizard whose evil operates through persuasion and industrial production. Smaug is the appetite villain. The dragon's evil is not cosmic, not strategic, not intellectual. The dragon's evil is the evil of appetite, of wanting, of consuming, of the insatiable desire that takes everything and gives nothing back. The appetite evil is the most recognizable evil. Morgoth's cosmic rebellion is abstract. Sauron's manipulation is complex. Saruman's corruption is sophisticated. Smaug's appetite is simple. The dragon wants the gold. The dragon takes the gold. The dragon sits on the gold. The simplicity makes the evil instantly recognizable. Everyone knows someone like Smaug. Not literally a dragon, but a being whose relationship with resources is purely possessive. A being who takes without giving. A being who sits on what they have and refuses to share. A being whose appetite is the organizing principle of their existence. Smaug is the everyday villain elevated to mythological scale. The hoarder, the miser, the being who takes and does not give, scaled up from the personal to the catastrophic. The dragon is the human failing made monstrous, the specific, recognizable quality of greed given scales and wings and fire. The recognition is why Smaug resonates. Not because dragons are frightening, but because the quality the dragon embodies is a quality every reader recognizes. Every reader has encountered Smaug. Every reader has met the being whose appetite is the being's identity. The dragon is the myth. The appetite is the reality. And the reality, mythologized, becomes the most famous dragon in literature. Part 14. The Burglar. Gandalf's choice of Bilbo Baggins as the quest's 14th member, the Burglar, the specific role that the quest requires but that no dwarf can fill, is one of the most consequential decisions in the history of Middle-earth. The choice makes no sense to the dwarves. Bilbo is a hobbit. Bilbo is small, soft, comfort-loving, and thoroughly inexperienced in the specific quality of dangerous adventure that the quest demands. Bilbo has never fought a battle, never travelled further than Bree, never encountered anything more threatening than a mild social embarrassment. The choice makes perfect sense to Gandalf. Gandalf understands something about hobbits that the dwarves do not. Hobbits are invisible. Not literally invisible, though Bilbo will soon acquire literal invisibility through the ring. Socially invisible. Culturally invisible. Below the notice of the powerful, the dangerous, the specific quality of beings whose attention is focused on threats and who do not perceive non-threats. Smaug does not know what a hobbit is. This is crucial. The dragon, whose intelligence is vast, whose awareness of the world is broad, whose knowledge of the peoples of Middle-earth is extensive, the dragon has never encountered a hobbit. The dragon does not know the smell of a hobbit, does not know the footfall of a hobbit, does not know the specific quality of hobbitness that would allow the dragon to identify the intruder. Gandalf is sending the undetectable against the omniscient, sending the being that the dragon cannot categorize against the being that categorizes everything. The hobbit is the vulnerability in the dragon's awareness, the gap in the dragon's knowledge, the one kind of being that the dragon's vast, paranoid, hyper-alert consciousness has not been calibrated to detect. The choice is brilliant. The choice is also cruel. Gandalf is sending an unprepared hobbit into the lair of the most dangerous creature in Middle-earth, on the calculation that the hobbit's very unfitness for the task is the quality that makes the hobbit fit for the task. The cruelty is not callous. Gandalf cares about Bilbo, but Gandalf cares about the strategic situation more, cares about the dragon on the northern flank problem more than about the comfort and safety of any individual, including the individual that Gandalf is sending to solve the problem. Part 15. The Secret Door. The quest for Erebor hinges on a door. Not the front gate. The front gate is Smaug's entrance. The ruined dragon widened, suicide to approach entrance that no sane being would use. The secret door. The back entrance. The hidden passage that Thrur's architects built into the mountain's western face, concealed behind a stone panel that can only be opened by the last light of Durin's Day. The secret door is the architectural memory of the catastrophe. The door was built because the builders knew that catastrophe was possible, knew that a dragon might come, that the front gate might fall, that the kingdom might need a way out that the attacker did not know about. The door is the engineer's answer to the question, what do we do when the thing we fear most actually happens? The answer, we leave a door that nobody can see and that can only be opened under specific, astronomically rare conditions. We build the escape route into the mountain the way we build the treasury and the throne room, as a permanent, structurally integrated feature of the kingdom's design. The key to the door was Thrur's. The map that shows the door's location was Thrur's. Both objects were passed from Thrur to Thrinn to Gandalf, the specific chain of custody that connects the door's secret to the quest's inception. Gandalf gives the key and the map to Thorin at the meeting in Bag End, and the giving is the specific, material, physically present connection between the catastrophe's past and the quest's future. The door is a threshold. Not just architecturally, narratively, the door is the threshold between the outside world and the dragon's world. The door is the specific physical boundary that Bilbo must cross to become the burglar. The point at which the Hobbit stops being a tourist and starts being a participant in the confrontation with the dragon. The opening of the door, the last light of Durin's day falling on the keyhole. The key turning, the stone panel swinging inward, is one of the most suspenseful moments in The Hobbit. The moment when the door opens is the moment when the quest becomes real. The moment when the theoretical we will enter the mountain and deal with the dragon becomes the physical. The mountain is open and the dragon is inside. Bilbo goes through the door, goes down the tunnel, goes into the dark, toward the red glow at the tunnel's end, toward the heat and the smell and the specific growing awareness that the thing at the end of the tunnel is not a metaphor. The thing at the end of the tunnel is a dragon. Part 16. The conversation in the dark. The dialogue between Bilbo and Smaug is one of the most celebrated scenes in 20th century fantasy literature, and it is celebrated because it is not what anyone expects. It is not a fight. It is a conversation. Bilbo does not attack Smaug. Bilbo talks to Smaug. The Hobbit enters the dragon's chamber, the vast, gold-filled, heat-shimmering cavern where the dragon lies on the hoard, and the Hobbit and the dragon have a conversation. The conversation is a game of riddles and evasions, of half-truths and misdirections, of the specific quality of verbal fencing that Tolkien excels at, and that the English literary tradition values above almost any other form of intellectual exchange. Bilbo speaks in riddles, does not give his name, gives descriptions instead. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. The descriptions are true but uninformative. They tell Smaug what Bilbo has done without telling Smaug who Bilbo is or what Bilbo wants. Smaug responds with a specific quality of intelligence that makes the dragon more dangerous than any physical threat. Smaug understands the game. Smaug recognizes the evasions. Smaug plays along, not because the dragon is fooled, but because the dragon is curious. The dragon has been alone in the mountain for 2 centuries. The dragon has not had a conversation in 200 years. The arrival of a being who can speak, who can trade riddles, who can engage the dragon's intelligence, is, for Smaug, a novelty. A entertainment. A break in the monotony of lying on gold in the dark. The conversation reveals Smaug's character. The dragon is vain, enormously, pathologically, destructively vain. The dragon knows the dragon is magnificent, knows the scales are beautiful, knows the fire is devastating, knows the intelligence is sharp. The vanity is not insecurity. The dragon is not seeking validation. The vanity is the specific quality of self-satisfaction that comes from being, in objective terms, the most dangerous being in the room. The dragon is vain, because the dragon is correct. The dragon is magnificent. The vanity is justified. And the justified vanity makes the dragon more dangerous, not less, because the dragon, secure in its magnificence, does not take the Hobbit seriously. The conversation also reveals the dragon's psychological warfare capability. Smaug does not simply talk to Bilbo. Smaug plants seeds. Seeds of doubt. Seeds of suspicion. The dragon suggests that the dwarves are using Bilbo, that the dwarves do not intend to share the treasure, that the Hobbit is a tool rather than a partner, that the real danger to Bilbo is not the dragon but the dwarves who sent him into the dragon's chamber. The seeds work. After the conversation, Bilbo is shaken, not by the dragon's fire, by the dragon's words. The suggestion that the dwarves are untrustworthy, the suggestion that Thorin's desire for the treasure will override Thorin's obligations to his companions, plants a doubt in Bilbo's mind that the subsequent events will confirm. The dragon's psychological warfare is more effective than the dragon's fire. The fire can kill the body, the words can kill the trust. And the trust, the fragile, essential, quest-sustaining quality of mutual reliance between the burglar and the dwarves is the thing that the dragon's words attack. Part 17. The dragon's vanity. Smaug's vanity is the flaw that kills him. Let me be specific about this, because the specifics are what make the death both satisfying and instructive. During the conversation with Bilbo, Smaug rolls onto his back, shows the hobbit his belly, the underside, the softer scales, the specific area of the dragon's anatomy that is less armored than the back and the flanks. The dragon does this to display the diamond waistcoat, the layer of gems that have embedded themselves in the softer belly scales through 2 centuries of lying on the treasure. The display is vanity. The dragon is showing off. The dragon is saying, "Look at me. Look at how beautiful I am. Even my belly, my most vulnerable area, is armored in jewels. Even my weakness is magnificent." And the display reveals the weakness. Bilbo, looking at the diamond-encrusted belly, sees something that the dragon does not know the hobbit has seen: a bare patch. A gap in the gem armor, a single area on the dragon's left breast where the scales are bare and the flesh is exposed. The bare patch is the gap, the vulnerability, the specific, tiny, barely visible flaw in the dragon's otherwise impenetrable defenses. The gap that Girion's arrows may have created 2 centuries ago. The gap that the dragon does not know about, or does not care about, because the dragon's vanity says, "I am perfect. I am invulnerable. No flaw exists that I need to worry about." Bilbo sees the gap. Bilbo tells the dwarves about the gap. The information travels through the dwarves, through Lake Town, through the specific, oral, person-to-person chain of communication that eventually delivers the information to the one being who can use it. Bard the bowman. The dragon's vanity creates the chain that kills the dragon. The dragon rolls over to show off. The showing off reveals the gap. The gap is communicated to the archer. The archer fires. The dragon dies. Vanity is the mechanism. The dragon's desire to be admired, the specific, pathological, look at my beautiful belly quality of self-display that the dragon cannot resist, is the mechanism that produces the dragon's death. The flaw is not the bare patch. The flaw is the vanity that reveals the bare patch. The dragon is killed by the dragon's own character. Part 18. Smaug's attack on Lake Town. The dragon's attack on Lake Town is the eruption. The transition from the slow, deliberate, conversation-paced tension of the Bilbo encounter to the explosive, cinematic, catastrophic violence that the dragon has been holding in reserve for 2 centuries. Smaug is enraged. The burglar has been in the treasury. The burglar has stolen a cup. The burglar has been talking to the dragon, and the dragon, whose intelligence is formidable, whose paranoia is acute, has deduced that the burglar came from Lake Town, that the men of the lake are involved, that the town on the water has been aiding the intruders who dared to enter the dragon's mountain and steal from the dragon's hoard. Smaug comes out of the mountain. Not stealthily, explosively, the dragon erupts from Erebor like a volcano erupting. The fire lights the sky. The wings beat the air. The specific visual quality of a great fire drake in combat flight, the vast body, the trailing fire, the eyes like searchlights sweeping the ground. The dragon in fury is the most terrifying sight in the Third Age. Smaug flies to Lake Town. The flight is short. The long lake is not far from Erebor. The dragon crosses the desolation in minutes. The lake shimmers below. The town on its pilings glows with lamplight. And the fire falls. The attack on Lake Town is the first attack on a populated settlement that Smaug has conducted since the destruction of Dale 2 centuries earlier. The dragon has been dormant. The dragon has been lying on the hoard. The dragon has not used the fire in anger for nearly 200 years. The fire has not diminished. The fire that falls on Lake Town is the same fire that destroyed Dale, the same intensity, the same temperature. The same specific quality of supernatural incendiary force that a great fire drake produces. 2 centuries of dormancy have not weakened the dragon's primary weapon. The fire is as devastating now as it was the day Smaug took Erebor. Lake Town burns. The wooden buildings ignite. The pilings catch fire. The specific aquatic architecture that was supposed to protect the town from dragonfire, the water, the distance from the mountain, the non-flammable quality of the lake itself, none of it is sufficient. The dragon's fire reaches the town despite the water. The dragon's fire ignites the buildings despite the distance. The defenses that 2 centuries of fear and preparation have produced are inadequate against the specific, overwhelming quality of destruction that a dragon delivers. Part 18b. What Lake Town built against the fear. Lake Town's entire existence is a response to the dragon. The town's location, on the water, far from the mountain. The town's architecture, wooden pilings, escape boats, the specific quality of temporary feeling, easily rebuilt construction that a community produces when it knows that destruction might come again at any time. The town's economy, fishing, trading, the specific quality of low capital, highly mobile economic activity that a community pursues when it cannot invest in permanent infrastructure, because permanent infrastructure might be destroyed. Lake Town's entire culture is shaped by Smaug. The dragon, lying in the mountain 2 days' march away, is the invisible presence that determines every decision the town makes. Build on water because water does not burn. Keep the boats ready because you might need to flee. Do not invest in stone walls because stone walls will not stop a dragon. The fear is institutional. The fear is passed from generation to generation, not through direct experience. Most of the people living in Lake Town when Smaug attacks have never seen a dragon, but through the institutional memory that the community maintains. The stories, the preparations, the specific cultural town-wide quality of we remember what happened to Dale that keeps the fear alive across 2 centuries. The institutional fear is both the town's protection and the town's limitation. The fear keeps the town prepared, keeps the escape routes maintained, keeps the water-based architecture functional, keeps the community ready for the catastrophe that might come. The fear also keeps the town small, prevents investment, prevents growth, prevents the specific quality of we are building for the future confidence that a thriving community requires. Lake Town under the dragon's shadow is a community in suspended development. Not declining, but not growing. Not dying, but not fully living. The community exists in the specific, held breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop quality of life that a known but unpredictable threat produces. Part 18, Sea Bard and the lineage of Girion. Bard the Bowman is the descendant of Girion, Lord of Dale. The lineage matters, not because the lineage gives Bard a claim to the treasure, but because the lineage gives Bard a relationship with the dragon that no one else possesses. Bard carries his ancestors' failure. Girion shot at Smaug on the day Dale fell. Girion's arrows bounced off the dragon's armor. Girion died. Dale was destroyed. The ancestors' failure, the failure to kill the dragon when the dragon could have been killed, is the inheritance that Bard carries. The inheritance is not guilt. Bard does not feel responsible for Girion's failure. The inheritance is obligation, the specific, lineage-transmitted quality of unfinished business that the ancestor's failure places on the descendant. Girion tried to kill the dragon. Girion failed. The business is unfinished. The descendant inherits the obligation to finish it. Bard does not seek the obligation. Bard is a bowman, a bargeman, a practical man who makes his living on the lake and who does not think of himself as a dragon slayer in waiting. The obligation finds Bard, finds him on the bridge, in the fire, with one arrow left and the dragon circling above. The black arrow is Girion's arrow, the specific, inherited, family-preserved weapon that connects Bard to his ancestor and the ancestor's unfinished business to the descendant's moment of action. The arrow that Bard fires is the arrow that Girion could not fire, the shot that the ancestor could not take, taken by the descendant 2 centuries later, using information that the ancestor did not have. Bard completes Girion's work. The dragon slaying is not simply a heroic act. It is the completion of an interrupted act, the finishing of a fight that began 200 years ago and that has been waiting 200 years for the fighter who would finish it. The lineage connects the beginning to the end, Dale's destruction to the dragon's death, Girion's failure to Bard's success. The first arrow to the last arrow, the ancestor's unfinished business to the descendant's completed obligation. The dragon is killed by a lineage, not by a single man, by a family, by the specific, multi-generational, century-spanning quality of inherited purpose that connects the ancestor who began the fight to the descendant who ends it. The town panics. The people flee, some into boats, some into the lake, some into the specific, desperate. Any direction that is away from the fire quality of flight that catastrophe produces. The defense collapses, the warriors scatter, the organization fails. The specific quality of coordinated resistance that an organized defense requires is impossible in the face of the dragon's overwhelming assault. Part 19. The Black Arrow and the Death of Smaug. Bard, the Bowman, the descendant of Girion, Lord of Dale. The man whose ancestor shot at the dragon on the day Dale fell, and whose ancestor's arrows may have created the gap in the dragon's armor that Bard will now exploit. Bard stands on the bridge, the last archer, the last defender. The specific, lone, dramatically positioned being who stands between the dragon and the complete destruction of Lake Town. The bridge is burning around him. The town is burning behind him. The dragon is circling above, preparing another pass, the fire building in the throat. A thrush, a small bird, an old thrush that has been listening to the dwarves' conversation about the dragon's weakness, the thrush comes to Bard, sits on his shoulder, speaks to him. The bare spot, the left breast, the gap in the diamond waistcoat. The information that Bilbo discovered in the dragon's chamber, transmitted through the dwarves, through the thrush, to the archer who stands on the burning bridge with one arrow left. The Black Arrow, the last of the great war arrows of Dale, the arrow that Bard has carried, that Bard's family has preserved, that the descendants of Girion have maintained across 2 centuries of exile as the specific, material, physical connection to the day that Dale was destroyed. Bard nocks the arrow, draws the bow, sees the dragon coming, the vast body banking in the night sky, the belly exposed, the gap visible in the firelight, the gap that the dragon does not know exists, the vulnerability that the dragon's vanity revealed, and that the dragon's vanity prevents the dragon from guarding. Bard shoots. The black arrow flies. The arrow crosses the distance between the bridge and the dragon. The arrow enters the gap. The arrow penetrates the bare flesh beneath the missing scale. The arrow buries itself to the feathering in the dragon's breast. Smaug screams. The scream, the specific, colossal, sky-shaking sound that a dying great fire drake produces. The scream is the sound of the most powerful creature in the Third Age dying. The dragon convulses. The wings fail. The fire erupts one last time, not directed, not aimed. Just the dragon's last reserves of flame, venting into the air as the life leaves the body. Smaug falls. Falls from the sky, falls into the long lake. The impact, the vast body hitting the water, the splash that sends waves crashing against Lake Town's remaining pilings. The impact is the end. The dragon is dead. The most terrifying creature in the Third Age is dead. The last of the great fire drakes is dead. The lake receives the body. The water closes over the dragon. The flames go out. The night is dark. Smaug is dead. Part 20. What Smaug's death means. The death of Smaug is the end of the dragons. Not figuratively, literally, Smaug is the last of the great fire drakes. With Smaug's death, the lineage that Morgoth began with Glorong in the First Age is extinguished. There will be no more great dragons in Middle-earth. The fire drakes are done. The extinction of the great dragons is one of the most consequential events of the Third Age, and it is presented in the narrative as a local event, as the death of a specific dragon in a specific place, not as the end of an entire category of being. The narrative focuses on the personal, on Bard's heroism, on Lake Town's destruction, on the specific quality of the arrow finding the gap. The narrative does not pause to say, this is the last dragon. This is the end of a species. This is the extinction of Morgoth's most devastating creation. But the implication is there. And the implication changes the meaning of the death. Smaug's death is not simply the killing of a monster. Smaug's death is the closing of a chapter, the end of the Dragon Age, the specific, irreversible termination of a kind of evil that has plagued Middle-earth since the First Age. The death also changes the strategic balance. Gandalf's fear, the fear that Sauron would recruit Smaug and use the dragon against the northern kingdoms, is resolved by the dragon's death. The strategic threat is eliminated. The northern flank is secured. The specific, geopolitical, big-picture problem that motivated Gandalf's involvement in the quest is solved. But the solution produces a new problem. The dragon is dead. The treasure is unguarded. The mountain is open. And the news that the dragon is dead and the treasure of Erebor is available, the news travels. Travels to the dwarves. Travels to the elves. Travels to the men. Travels to the orcs. Everyone wants the treasure. Everyone has a claim. Everyone is willing to fight for the claim. The dragon's death, which was supposed to resolve the conflict, creates a new conflict, a larger conflict, a multi-faction conflict. The specific quality of everybody against everybody that results when a vast unclaimed treasure becomes available to multiple competing parties. The Battle of Five Armies. Part 21. The Dragon Sickness. The treasure of Erebor, freed from the dragon's possession, does not become safe. The treasure becomes dangerous. And the danger is not the danger of the dragon. The danger is the danger that the treasure itself poses to the beings who desire it, the dragon sickness. The specific, pathological, Morgoth-tainted quality of obsession that proximity to dragon gold produces in mortal beings. The sickness is not metaphorical. The sickness is real, is a genuine, magically induced compulsion that the treasure exerts on every being who comes near it. Thorin gets the sickness. The dwarf king, the exile, the refugee, the being who has spent nearly 2 centuries dreaming of the mountain and the treasure, Thorin enters the treasury and the sickness takes him. The same sickness that consumed Thra. The same sickness that mirrors the dragon's own greed. The same pathological, possessive, mine quality of obsession that drove Thur's behavior before the dragon came. Thorin on the treasure is Smaug without the fire. The same posture, the possessive, defensive. Nobody touches this quality of a being who is sitting on a hoard. The same paranoia, the suspicion that others want the treasure, the belief that every being who approaches is a potential thief. The same isolation, the retreat from relationships, from alliances, from the specific quality of trust and cooperation that sustained the quest. The dragon sickness transforms Thorin from a leader into a dragon. Not physically, Thorin does not grow scales or breathe fire. Psychologically, behaviorally, the same greed that made Smaug sit on the hoard for 2 centuries is now making Thorin sit on the hoard and refuse to share it. The same possessiveness that made the dragon burn Dale to protect the treasure is now making Thorin prepare for war to protect the treasure. Bilbo sees the transformation. The Hobbit, who has spent the quest learning to love Thorin, learning to respect the Dwarf King's courage and devotion, learning to understand the specific quality of Dwarvish loyalty that makes Thorin admirable. Bilbo watches Thorin become something that is not admirable, watches the king become a dragon, watches the leader become a hoarder. The Arkenstone becomes the focal point. Thorin's obsession with the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, the gem that Thur claimed as the heirloom of his house. The Arkenstone is the treasure's treasure, the most valuable thing in the hoard, the thing that Thorin wants most. The specific, singular, jewel-shaped expression of the dragon sickness at its most intense. Bilbo has the Arkenstone, found it in the hoard, kept it, and now Bilbo faces a choice. Give the Arkenstone to Thorin, which will deepen the sickness and make the war more likely, or give the Arkenstone to Thorin's enemies, which will betray Thorin's trust but may prevent the war. Bilbo gives the Arkenstone to Bard and the Elven King. Bilbo betrays Thorin to save Thorin. The Hobbit commits the specific, morally complex, personally devastating act of breaking faith with a friend in order to prevent the friend from destroying himself. The betrayal is the moment when the Hobbit becomes the hero. Not the burglar, the hero. The being whose moral courage exceeds his physical courage. The being who does the right thing at the cost of the thing he values most, Thorin's friendship. Part 22. The Battle of 5 Armies. The Battle of 5 Armies is the consequence of the dragon's death. The battle is what happens when a vast, unclaimed treasure is contested by multiple parties who all believe they have a right to it. 5 Armies. The Dwarves, under Thorin and Din Ironfoot. The men of Laketown, under Bard. The Elves of Mirkwood, under Thranduil. The Orcs and Wargs, under Bolg. The Eagles, led by the Lord of the Eagles. The first 3 armies converge on Erebor for the treasure. The dwarves claim the treasure by right of ancestry. Erebor was Thrur's kingdom, and Thorin is Thrur's heir. The men claim a share by right of suffering. Lake Town was destroyed by the dragon, and the men are owed compensation. The elves claim a share by right of ancient agreement. Thranduil had dealings with Thrar, and the elves believe they are owed payment. The three claims are all legitimate. The dwarves' claim is legitimate, the treasure is dwarvish treasure, mined and forged by dwarvish hands. The men's claim is legitimate, Bard killed the dragon, and the men of Lake Town are homeless because of the dragon's attack. The elves' claim is legitimate, Thranduil has historical grounds for his demand, and the elves provided aid to the survivors of Lake Town. 3 legitimate claims. 1 treasure. No mechanism for resolving the competing claims except negotiation or violence. Thorin, consumed by the dragon sickness, refuses to negotiate. The result is the approach of violence, the 3 armies positioning for a battle that nobody truly wants, but that the dragon sickness makes inevitable. And then the orcs come. The 4th army, the orcs and wargs of the Misty Mountains, led by Bolg son of Azog, arrives at Erebor with the specific opportunistic quality of a predator that smells blood. The orcs do not care about legitimate claims. The orcs want the treasure and the killing. The orcs' arrival transforms the situation from a 3-way negotiation into a 5-way battle. The 3 legitimate claimants, dwarves, men, elves, unite against the orcs. The common enemy produces the alliance that the competing claims could not. The specific, shared, life-threatening quality of the orc attack forces the 3 parties to stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The battle is terrible. The fighting in the valley below Erebor is the largest battle in the northern lands since the Battle of Azanul Bazaar. Dwarves and men and elves fight orcs and wargs in the specific, chaotic, multi-front quality of combat that a 5-army battle produces. Thorin charges. Late in the battle, when the outcome is in doubt, Thorin, who has been hiding in the mountain, guarding the treasure, consumed by the sickness. Thorin breaks through the barricade at the front gate and charges into the battle with his dwarvish warriors. The charge is the dragon sickness breaking. The king, freed from the sickness by the specific quality of mortal danger that threatens his people, the king remembers who he is, remembers what matters, remembers that the treasure is not the point, that the people are the point, and the people are dying. Thorin charges. Thorin fights. Thorin is wounded. Thorin dies. Part 23. The death of Thorin. Thorin dies on the battlefield. Dies of his wounds. Dies after the battle is won, after the orcs are defeated, after the alliance holds, after the specific military quality of victory has been achieved. Thorin's deathbed scene is one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in Tolkien's entire body of work. The dying king asks to see the Hobbit. Bilbo comes. The Hobbit who stole the Arkenstone, who betrayed Thorin's trust, who gave the king's most prized possession to the king's enemies, the Hobbit comes to the king's bedside. And Thorin forgives him. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. The line is Thorin's deathbed revelation, the realization that comes too late to save the king, but in time to redeem him. The realization is this: the treasure was never the point. The gold was never worth what the gold cost. The specific, hoarding, dragon sickness quality of obsession that consumed Thorin was a disease that the dying king can now see clearly because the dying clears the vision. Thorin's forgiveness of Bilbo is Thorin's rejection of the dragon sickness. The forgiveness says, "You were right to steal the Arkenstone. You were right to betray my trust. You were right because my trust was corrupted, was serving the sickness rather than the friendship. You saw me more clearly than I saw myself, and the seeing, the specific, painful, friendship-destroying quality of the Hobbit's moral clarity, the seeing was the right thing, even though it hurt. The death of Thorin is the death of the dragon sickness in human form. Smaug is dead in the lake. The dragon sickness is dead in Thorin. The two deaths, the dragon's physical death and the sickness's spiritual death, are the story's twin resolutions. The external threat and the internal threat, both eliminated. The fire and the greed, both extinguished. Thorin is buried in Erebor. Buried with the Arkenstone on his breast, the gem that consumed him, the gem that he died to possess, the gem that is buried with him, because the gem belongs to no one now. The Arkenstone goes back into the mountain, goes back into the dark, goes back to the place where it was found, to lie forever on the breast of the king who loved it too much. Part 24. Bilbo goes home. Bilbo takes his share of the treasure, a small share, as Hobbit standards measure wealth, but a substantial fortune by any standard, and goes home, goes back to the Shire, goes back to Bag End, goes back to the specific, comfortable, fire-by-the-hearth quality of Hobbit life that the quest disrupted, and that the quest's completion allows Bilbo to resume. But Bilbo is not the same Hobbit who left. The quest has changed him. The dragon has changed him. The conversation in the dark, the specific, psychologically devastating experience of talking to a being of vast, malicious intelligence. The conversation has given Bilbo a quality that he did not have before. The knowledge of evil. Not the experience of evil. Bilbo has not become evil. The knowledge of evil, the understanding that evil exists, that evil is intelligent, that evil is persuasive, and that the defense against evil is not strength, but character. Bilbo carries the ring. This detail, the ring, the magic ring that Bilbo found in Gollum's cave, becomes, in retrospect, the most consequential thing that happened during the quest. The quest was about the dragon. The quest ended with the dragon's death. But the ring, the small, gold, seemingly insignificant ring that the Hobbit picked up in the dark, the ring is the thing that the quest left in the world. The thing that the dragon's story bequeathed to the ring's story. The thing that connects the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings. The ring is the dragon's last gift. Not literally. The ring was not Smaug's. The ring was in the mountains, in Gollum's cave, far from Erebor. But the quest that brought Bilbo to Gollum's cave was the quest for Erebor. The quest that was motivated by the dragon's occupation of the mountain produced the encounter with the ring. The dragon's story created the conditions for the ring story to begin. Without Smaug, there is no quest. Without the quest, there is no Bilbo in the mountains. Without Bilbo in the mountains, there is no finding of the ring. Without the finding of the ring, there is no Lord of the Rings. The dragon is the catalyst. The dragon's occupation of Erebor creates the desire to reclaim Erebor. The desire produces the quest. The quest produces the Hobbit in the mountains. The Hobbit in the mountains produces the finding of the ring. The finding of the ring produces everything that follows. Smaug, who never knew about the ring, is the indirect cause of the ring's discovery. The dragon, sleeping on the hoard in the dark, is the being whose existence set in motion the chain of events that would eventually destroy the Dark Lord, whose master created the dragon's kind. The irony is theological. Morgoth's creation produces the chain of events that destroys Morgoth's servant. The dragon that was bred for evil inadvertently enables the ultimate victory of good. The instrument of the Dark Lord's power becomes, through the specific quality of unintended consequence that the mythology consistently attributes to providence, the catalyst for the Dark Lord's defeat. Part 25. The Rebuilding. Erebor after Smaug is not the same kingdom as Erebor before Smaug. The mountain is the same. The treasure is the same, minus the Arkenstone, and the portions distributed to Bard and Thranduil. But the kingdom, the culture, the people, the specific quality of dwarvish civilization that inhabited the mountain is different. Din Ironfoot becomes king under the mountain. Din, Thorin's cousin, the warrior from the Iron Hills who arrived with his army in time for the Battle of Five Armies, Din takes the throne that Thorin's death leaves empty. The succession is not direct, not father to son, not the unbroken lineage that the dwarvish tradition prefers. The succession passes sideways, from Thorin's line to Din's line, because Thorin died without an heir. Din rules well, rules for decades, rebuilds the kingdom, restores the halls, re-establishes the commerce that the dragon's occupation destroyed. Dale is rebuilt under Bard, now King of Dale. The alliance between the mountain and the city, the dwarf-human partnership that had flourished before Smaug, is renewed. The rebuilding is impressive. The specific quality of dwarvish resilience, the capacity to be driven from a home, to wander in exile for generations, and to return and rebuild what was lost, is displayed in the reconstruction of Erebor, with the same intensity that it was displayed in the original construction. But the rebuilt Erebor is haunted by the memory of the dragon. The halls where Smaug lay are cleaned, repaired, restored. The treasure is reorganized, counted, catalogued, distributed. The specific physical evidence of the dragon's 2-century occupation is removed from the mountain's interior, but the memory remains. The knowledge that a dragon can take the mountain, that the kingdom's greatest achievement can be destroyed in a single day by a single being, that knowledge persists. The rebuilt kingdom is a more careful kingdom. A kingdom that remembers. A kingdom that does not forget the lesson that the dragon taught, that accumulated wealth in a mountain kingdom is a target, and that the target will eventually attract the predator. Part 26. Smaug's psychology. Let me return to the dragon for a moment, because the dragon's psychology deserves more attention than the narrative's external events can provide. Smaug is intelligent. Deeply, dangerously, devastatingly intelligent. The dragon's intelligence is not the intelligence of an animal, not the cunning of a predator or the cleverness of a tool using primate. The dragon's intelligence is the intelligence of a sapient being, a being capable of abstract thought, of strategic planning, of the specific quality of psychological manipulation that the conversation with Bilbo displays. But the intelligence is constrained. The intelligence operates within the boundaries of the dragon's nature, within the specific, Morgoth-bred, greed-driven parameters that define the dragon's engagement with the world. The intelligence is brilliant within its domain and blind outside it. Smaug can evaluate threats, can assess military capability, can calculate the strategic implications of an intruder in the mountain, can determine from Bilbo's riddles that the Hobbit came from Lake Town and that the men of the lake are involved. The intelligence, applied to the specific domain of threat assessment and treasure protection, is formidable. But Smaug cannot understand selflessness, cannot comprehend the possibility that a being might act for reasons other than greed, cannot imagine that the Hobbit's motivation might be friendship rather than treasure, cannot conceive of the specific, non-transactional quality of the Hobbit's relationship with the Dwarves. The relationship that is based on loyalty and affection rather than on a share of the gold. The intelligence is constrained by the nature. The dragon can think about anything, but the dragon can only understand things that the dragon's nature includes. The dragon's nature includes greed, vanity, dominance, and destruction. The dragon's nature does not include love, friendship, selflessness, or sacrifice. And the things that the dragon's nature does not include are the things that the dragon's intelligence cannot process. Bilbo defeats Smaug, defeats the dragon psychologically in the conversation, because Bilbo operates in the domain that the dragon's intelligence cannot reach. The Hobbit's motivations are invisible to the dragon. The Hobbit's values are incomprehensible to the dragon. The Hobbit's specific quality of Hobbitness, the quality that Gandalf chose him for, the quality that makes the Hobbit the one being that the dragon cannot categorize, is the quality that the dragon's intelligence cannot process. The dragon is defeated by the thing the dragon cannot understand. The Fire Drake, whose intelligence can assess any military threat, is confounded by a being whose threat is not military. The Hoarder, whose paranoia can detect the loss of a single cup from a million-item hoard, is blind to the loss of the information that the Hobbit carries out of the mountain. The location of the bare patch. The vulnerability in the armor. The gap that will kill the dragon. Part 27. The Dragon and Sauron. The relationship between Smaug and Sauron is one of the most important unwritten chapters in the mythology. The chapter that did not happen because the quest intervened. Sauron knew about Smaug. The Dark Lord, gathering strength in Dol Guldur, rebuilding the capacity for war that the last alliance had destroyed, preparing for the return to Mordor and the re-establishment of the Dark Kingdom, Sauron was aware of the dragon in the north, was aware of the strategic potential, was planning. Gandalf believed, and the text supports this belief, that Sauron would eventually have approached Smaug, would have offered the dragon an alliance, would have proposed a partnership. The dragon's fire and the Dark Lord's army combined against the free peoples of the north. The alliance would have been devastating. Smaug's fire, deployed in coordination with Sauron's forces, would have destroyed the northern kingdoms with a speed and completeness that Sauron's armies alone could not have achieved. The specific quality of dragon fire, the city-destroying, army-immolating, morale-shattering quality of the weapon would have multiplied the effectiveness of Sauron's military capability by an order of magnitude. The timeline matters. The White Council's assault on Dol Guldur, which drove Sauron from his hiding place and forced the Dark Lord to withdraw eastward, occurred in 2941 of the Third Age, the same year as the quest for Erebor. The coincidence is not a coincidence. The two events are connected. The quest and the assault are parts of the same strategic campaign, coordinated by Gandalf, designed to address two threats simultaneously. Sauron would eventually resurface in Mordor and declare himself openly a decade later. But by then, the dragon was long dead and the Northern Alliance was already rebuilt. The quest removes the dragon. The assault removes Sauron from Dol Guldur. The two operations, conducted simultaneously, prevent the specific nightmare scenario that Gandalf feared, the alliance between the dragon and the Dark Lord. The timing is tight. If the quest had been delayed, if Thorin had not agreed to the quest when he did, if the company had not reached Erebor when they did, if the dragon had not been killed when it was, Sauron might have contacted Smaug before the quest could remove the dragon. The alliance might have formed. The northern kingdoms might have been destroyed. The War of the Ring, when it came, might have been fought without the northern allies, without the dwarves of Erebor, without the men of Dale, without the specific quality of northern military strength that the Battle of Dale, fought simultaneously with the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, drew off Sauron's northern forces. The quest for Erebor is the hinge. The specific, timely, narrowly achieved operation that removes the dragon before the Dark Lord can recruit the dragon. The quest is not just about treasure. The quest is about preventing the catastrophe that Smaug's alliance with Sauron would have produced. Part 28. The Legacy of the Dragon. Smaug's legacy extends far beyond the dragon's death. The legacy is not the treasure. The treasure is distributed, spent, returned to circulation. The legacy is the change that the dragon produced in the world. The specific, permanent, irreversible alterations to the geopolitics, the cultures, and the peoples of the northern lands. The Dwarves of Erebor are changed. The exile and return narrative, the catastrophe, the wandering, the quest, the reclamation, has become the central story of Durin's folk. The story of Smaug is now the story of the Dwarves. The story of a people who lost everything, who endured, who fought back, who reclaimed what was theirs. The dragon is the Dwarves' defining villain, the being whose evil gave the Dwarves their most important story. The men of Dale and Laketown are changed. The destruction and rebuilding, Dale destroyed, Laketown burned, both rebuilt, has given the human communities of the region a resilience narrative that sustains them through subsequent challenges. The men who survived Smaug know that they can survive anything. The men who rebuilt Dale know that they can rebuild anything. The dragon's destruction, survived and overcome, is the specific quality of historical experience that makes a community stronger. The landscape is changed. The desolation recovers, slowly over decades. The poisoned soil regenerates and the dead zone around the mountain begins to support life again. But the recovery takes time, and the landscape during the recovery bears the specific, visible, geographically evident marks of the dragon's 2-century presence. The strategic balance is changed. The dragon's removal from the board, the elimination of the northern fire drake from the strategic calculus, changes the balance of power in the north. The free peoples are stronger. Sauron's options are reduced. The specific quality of strategic vulnerability that Gandalf feared, the dragon on the northern flank, is resolved. The resolution makes the War of the Ring possible. Not possible in the sense that the war would not have happened without the dragon's death. The war was coming regardless. Possible in the sense that the war can be won. The Northern Alliance, Erebor, Dale, the Iron Hills, that fights the Battle of Dale during the War of the Ring, is the alliance that was made possible by the dragon's death. The northern front that holds against Sauron's forces is the front that exists because the quest for Erebor succeeded. Smaug's death saves the world twice. Once directly, by removing the dragon as a strategic threat. Once indirectly, by enabling the Northern Alliance that fights during the War of the Ring, and that draws off enough of Sauron's forces to make the victory at the Pelennor Fields and the Black Gate possible. Part 28b. The Battle of Dale. During the War of the Ring, 77 years after Smaug's death, the Northern Alliance is tested. Sauron sends an army north. The army attacks Dale and Erebor simultaneously. King Din Ironfoot, now old but still formidable, leads the defense. Brand, King of Dale, Bard's grandson, fights alongside the Dwarves. The two peoples, united by the shared history of the dragon's destruction and the shared work of rebuilding, defend together what they rebuilt together. The Battle of Dale is fierce. Brand is killed. Din falls defending Brand's body. The Dwarf King protecting the Man King even in death. The alliance holding even as the kings die. The sons take over. Bard II becomes King of Dale. Thorin III Stonehelm becomes king under the mountain. The siege is endured, and when the news comes that the ring is destroyed, the siege breaks. The chain runs from the dragon through the quest, through the rebuilding, through the alliance, through the battle. Smaug's occupation produced the quest. The quest produced the death. The death produced the rebuilding. The rebuilding produced the alliance. The alliance held the northern front during the War of the Ring. The dragon, dead for 77 years, is still shaping events. Part 28c. What Smaug dreamed. Dragon's dream. This is not confirmed in the text, but the implication is present, and the dreams, if they exist, tell you everything about the dragon's inner life. Perhaps the dragon dreams of gold. The default assumption, the obsessive, coin-by-coin awareness of the treasure, sustained through sleep as through waking. The dragon's dreams are the dragon's waking state continued. Perhaps the dragon dreams of fire. The night the dragon came to Erebor, replayed across 2 centuries of dormancy. The attack. The conquest. The specific quality of overwhelming triumph that the taking of Erebor represented. Perhaps the dragon dreams of the north. The withered heath. The cold, desolate dragon-breeding territory where Smaug was born. The time before the Horde, when the greed was fresh and the world was full of unconquered mountains. Perhaps the dragon dreams of nothing. 2 centuries of pure awareness. The Horde, the dark, the being the dragon on the gold that does not require narrative or imagination. The consciousness fully occupied by the constant perception of every piece of treasure. 200 years of uninterrupted dormancy. 200 years of lying in the dark, on the gold, with the fire banked and the eyes half closed. And then the door opens. The air changes. The dragon smells something that does not belong, something the 2 centuries have not prepared the dragon for. The smell of a hobbit. The waking is the end of the dream. The waking is the beginning of the end. Part 28d. The economics of the dragon. Smaug's occupation of Erebor has economic consequences that extend far beyond the destruction of the mountain and the city. Erebor was the economic engine of the northern lands. The mining operations produced gold, gems, and worked metals that flowed into the regional economy through Dale. The economic activity supported not just the dwarves and the men of Dale, but the entire network of communities that traded with the mountain, farmers, merchants, craftsmen. The multi-layered economic ecosystem that a major mining operation sustains. Smaug's occupation removed the engine. The mining stopped. The forging stopped. The trade stopped. The gold that had flowed through the regional economy was now sitting in the mountain, under the dragon, doing nothing. The consequences extended to every community that depended on the mountain's output. 200 years of economic disruption. 200 years during which the northern economy operated without its primary source of gold and worked metals. Some communities adapted. Lake Town survived by trading in fish. The Iron Hills dwarves continued to mine at lower output. The economy adjusted, imperfectly, painfully. Some communities did not adapt. The smaller settlements, farming villages, trading posts, the small-scale economic nodes that depended on the Erebor trade, those communities withered. The economic opportunity that sustained them disappeared, and the communities declined or vanished. Smaug is the most effective economic weapon the Shadow deployed in the Third Age. Not through deliberate strategy, Smaug is not pursuing an economic agenda. Through nature. The greed removes wealth from circulation. The removal disrupts the economy. The disruption impoverishes the communities. The impoverishment weakens the peoples. The weakening serves the Shadow. The dragon does not need to burn the towns to destroy them. The dragon only needs to hoard the gold. The hoarding does the rest. Part 28e. The smell of the dragon. Smaug has a smell. The smell is an overlooked detail in the narrative, but the smell is the sensory dimension that completes the portrait of the dragon as a being of overwhelming physical presence. The smell is fire. Sulfur. Burning metal. The specific olfactory signature of a being whose internal furnace maintains temperatures that would melt dwarvish steel. The dragon smells like a forge that has been burning for 2 centuries without being cleaned. The smell fills the mountain. The dwarves who enter Erebor after the quest smell the dragon even after the dragon has left. The specific, lingering, won't-come-out quality of the dragon's scent permeates the stone, has soaked into the walls, the floors, the ceilings of the halls that the dragon occupied. Bilbo smells the dragon before Bilbo sees the dragon. The smell is the first warning, the specific olfactory nose and throat burning signal that the Hobbit is approaching something that is not a natural creature. The smell says you are entering the territory of a being whose body produces temperatures that would kill you on contact. The smell is also the dragon's territorial marker. The specific chemical quality of the dragon's scent, the sulfur, the metal, the burnt stone, marks the mountain as the dragon's territory the way a wolf's scent marks the wolf's territory. The smell says, "This space belongs to me." The smell says, anything that enters this space enters at its own risk. After Smaug's death, the smell fades slowly. The specific dragon-produced quality of the mountain's interior atmosphere takes months, possibly years, to dissipate. The dwarves who reclaim Erebor are reclaiming a mountain that still smells like the being who occupied it. The physical evidence of the dragon's presence persists in the stone long after the dragon's body has sunk to the bottom of the long lake. Part 29. The dragon and the gold. The relationship between the dragon and the gold is the most philosophically loaded relationship in the entire Hobbit narrative, and it deserves specific attention, because the relationship is the story's deepest theme. Gold is not evil. The treasure of Erebor is not inherently dangerous. The gold, the gems, the mithril, the works of craft, these are objects. Objects that the dwarves mined and forged, and that have value, because the dwarves' labour gave them value. The objects are not cursed. The objects are not sentient. The objects do not have moral qualities. But the objects attract evil. The gold's value, the specific quality of desirability that the gold possesses, attracts the specific quality of greed that produces evil outcomes. The dragon comes for the gold. The dragon sickness infects the gold's possessors. The gold's desirability produces the conflict that leads to the Battle of 5 Armies. The gold is a catalyst, a substance that enables a reaction without being changed by the reaction. The gold enables greed. The gold enables conflict. The gold enables the specific cascading chain of acquisitive desire that produces the dragon's attack, the exile, the quest, the battle, and the death. The gold is not changed by any of this. The gold that Thorin covets is the same gold that Smaug hoarded. The gold that Din distributes is the same gold that Thrur accumulated. The gold does not change. The gold is the constant, the unchanging substance around which the changing desires of mortal and immortal beings revolve. The relationship between the being and the gold is the relationship that determines the outcome. Thrur's relationship with the gold was possessive, and the possessiveness attracted the dragon. Smaug's relationship with the gold was hoarding, and the hoarding produced the desolation. Thorin's relationship with the gold was obsessive, and the obsession produced the dragon sickness. Bilbo's relationship with the gold was indifferent, and the indifference is what makes Bilbo the hero. Bilbo does not want the gold. This is the specific quality that makes Bilbo unique among the story's characters. The Hobbit does not desire the treasure. The Hobbit desires home, desires the Shire, desires the specific, comfortable, non-golden quality of Hobbit life that the gold cannot provide. The Hobbit who does not want the gold is the being who saves everyone from the gold's effects. The Hobbit's indifference to the treasure, the specific Hobbit quality of not caring about gold that the Hobbit carries through the entire quest, is the antidote to the dragon sickness. The Hobbit is immune because the Hobbit's desires are elsewhere. The Hobbit wants food and home and friendship. The Hobbit does not want gold. Part 30. The Dragon as Metaphor. Smaug is the literalization of hoarding. The dragon, sitting on the gold, using nothing, producing nothing, contributing nothing. The dragon is the living image of what hoarding does to wealth, freezes it, removes it from circulation, prevents the wealth from doing the things that wealth is supposed to do, funding commerce, enabling trade, supporting the creation of new wealth. The treasure under the mountain, while Smaug sits on it, is dead wealth. The gold does not circulate. The gems do not inspire new craft. The mithril does not armor new warriors. The wealth is present, is physically there, in the mountain, in the treasury, but the wealth is inert, functionless. The specific quality of economic activity that makes wealth valuable is absent because the wealth's possessor does not use it. Smaug is the miser. The dragon is the mythological expression of the phenomenon that Tolkien observed in the real world. The hoarding of wealth by beings who do not use it, who do not share it, who do not allow the wealth to serve the purposes that wealth was created to serve. The dragon is not a capitalist. The dragon is not a banker. The dragon is the negation of both, the being who removes wealth from the economic system entirely. The dragon is the black hole of economics, the being into which wealth flows and from which wealth does not emerge. The dragon disrupts the economy not by competing but by absorbing, by taking the wealth and sitting on it and doing nothing. The desolation is the economic consequence. The lands around Erebor, the farms, the towns, the trading communities that depended on the wealth flowing through the mountain, those lands die when the dragon takes the mountain. Not because the dragon attacks them directly, because the dragon stops the flow. The economic activity that the mountain's commerce supported is cut off. The towns wither. The farms fail. The specific quality of economic life that the mountain's wealth sustained is extinguished by the dragon's hoarding. The dragon kills the economy by hoarding. The dragon kills the landscape by existing. The dragon kills the culture by occupying the mountain that the culture depended on. The dragon's destruction is not just physical, it is economic, cultural, and social. The dragon destroys the world not by burning it, but by sitting on it. Part 31. Why the Dwarves could not just wait. There is a question that practical-minded readers ask about the Smaug story. Why did the Dwarves not simply wait for the dragon to die? The question seems reasonable. Dragons are mortal, or at least dragons are not eternal. Eventually, even a great fire drake must age, must weaken, must succumb to the passage of time. Why not wait? Why not let the centuries pass and the dragon decline and the mountain become accessible without the risk of the quest? The answer is multifold, and each fold reveals something about the dwarves and the dragon. First, there was no guarantee that Smaug would die of old age. The lifespan of a great fire drake is unknown. Glorong, the first dragon, was killed in battle. He did not die of old age. And Callaghan was killed in the War of Wrath. The great dragons of the mythology do not die naturally. They die violently, or they persist. Smaug might have survived for another 1,000 years, might have survived for 2,000, might have survived long enough for Durin's folk to forget Erebor entirely. Second, the dwarves' memory would fade. 2 centuries of exile had already dimmed the connection between Durin's folk and their ancestral home. Another century would dim it further. Another 2 centuries and the memory of Erebor would become mythology rather than history, would become a story rather than a grievance, a legend rather than a claim. The dwarves had to act while the memory was still alive, while the exiles who remembered Erebor were still present, while the desire to return was still a living motivation rather than a historical footnote. Third, Gandalf's strategic concern. The dragon on the northern flank problem was not a problem that waiting would solve. Waiting would make the problem worse, would give Sauron more time to contact the dragon, more time to propose the alliance, more time to prepare the coordinated assault on the northern kingdoms that Gandalf feared. Waiting was not a neutral option. Waiting was giving the enemy time. Fourth, Thorin's personal timeline. Thorin was old, not mortally old. Dwarves live longer than men, but old enough that the quest represented a now or never decision. If Thorin did not attempt the quest in his current year, the opportunity might not come again. The key, the map, the wizard's willingness to help, these things might not align again in Thorin's lifetime. The quest had to happen. The question of why not wait is answered by the specific, multi-dimensional urgency that the situation produced. The dragon's uncertain lifespan, the fading memory, the strategic threat, and the personal timeline all converged on the same conclusion. Act now, or lose the chance to act. Part 32. Smaug's voice. Smaug's voice is one of the most carefully crafted elements of The Hobbit, and the voice tells you as much about the dragon as the fire does. Smaug speaks in the register of power that is used to talking to inferiors. The dragon's speech is condescending, amused, and faintly bored, the specific quality of a being who is so secure in its supremacy that the interaction with a lesser being is entertainment rather than engagement. The voice is honey. The voice is smoke. The voice is the specific quality of persuasive, seductive, intellectually compelling speech that draws the listener in despite the listener's better judgment. When Smaug speaks, Bilbo listens, not because the dragon forces him to listen, but because the voice is compelling. The voice is interesting. The voice has the specific quality of magnetic intelligence that makes the listener want to hear more, even when the listener knows that hearing more is dangerous. The voice is the weapon that the fire is not. The fire destroys bodies. The voice destroys judgment. The fire is external. It operates on the outside, on the physical environment, on the material world. The voice is internal. It operates on the inside, on the listener's thoughts, on the specific quality of decision-making that determines whether the listener acts wisely or foolishly. Smaug's voice plants the seeds of the Battle of Five Armies. The voice tells Bilbo that the dwarves cannot be trusted. The voice suggests that Thorin will hoard the treasure. The voice predicts that the quest's success will produce not reunion and joy, but conflict and betrayal. And the voice is right. The dragon's predictions come true. The dragon, lying in the dark on the gold, sees the future more clearly than the Hobbit, sees that the treasure will corrupt, that the dragon's sickness will consume, that the gold will produce the same effects on Thorin that it produced on Thra, and that it produces on every being who comes within. Its gravitational pull. The dragon's accuracy is the dragon's most terrifying quality. Not the fire, not the armor, not the size. The accuracy. The dragon sees the truth. The dragon knows how the story will unfold. The dragon, whose intelligence is constrained by its nature but brilliant within its domain, that intelligence produces predictions that are more accurate than the predictions of any other character in the narrative. Smaug tells Bilbo the truth, and the truth, the specific, devastating, prediction-confirmed quality of the dragon's assessment, is more dangerous than the fire, because the truth cannot be dodged. The fire can be avoided. The truth, once heard, remains. Part 33. The thrush and the chain of information. The thrush that carries the information about Smaug's weakness to Bard is one of the most important minor characters in The Hobbit, and the thrush's role reveals the specific quality of the narrative's information economy. Information about the dragon's weakness originates with Bilbo. The Hobbit sees the bare patch. The Hobbit communicates the information to the Dwarves. The Dwarves discuss the information in the presence of the thrush. The thrush, an old thrush, a thrush of Erebor, a bird whose ancestors have lived on the mountain since before the dragon came. The thrush hears the information and carries it to Bard. The chain is Bilbo Dwarves Thrush Bard. 4 links. Each link is necessary. Remove any link and the chain breaks and the information does not reach the archer. Without Bilbo, there is no observation. The Hobbit is the only being who has seen the dragon's belly up close. The Dwarves have not seen it. Bard has not seen it. The thrush has not seen it. The information originates with the Hobbit, because the Hobbit is the only being who has been in the dragon's chamber and survived. Without the Dwarves, there is no discussion. The information stays with Bilbo. The Hobbit knows the weakness, but has no mechanism to communicate it to the archer who needs it. The Dwarves, by discussing the information within earshot of the thrush, serve as the amplifier. The Dwarves make the information available to the wider world. Without the thrush, there is no transmission. The information stays with the Dwarves. The Dwarves know the weakness, but have no mechanism to communicate it to Bard. The thrush, the ancient bird of Erebor, the creature whose species memory connects the mountain's past to the mountain's present. The thrush carries the information across the miles between the mountain and the lake. Without Bard, there is no action. The information exists but is unused. The weakness is known but not exploited. Bard, the descendant of Girion, the heir of Dale, the being who has the skill, the weapon, and the specific quality of narrative destiny that places the right archer in the right position at the right moment. Bard is the terminal link. The being who converts information into action. The chain is the narrative's most precise expression of the collaborative nature of heroism. No single being kills the dragon. The killing is collaborative, is the product of the Hobbit's observation, the Dwarves' discussion, the thrush's transmission, and the archer's execution. 4 links, 4 essential contributions. 4 beings, each doing one thing that the others cannot, producing together the outcome that none of them could have produced alone. Part 34. Smaug and Glorong. The comparison between Smaug and Glorong, between the last great fire drake and the first, illuminates the specific quality of what Smaug is and what Smaug represents in the broader arc of Tolkien's mythology. Glorong was a weapon. The father of dragons was bred by Morgoth for a specific purpose, the destruction of the elves. Glorong served Morgoth directly. Glorong received orders. Glorong was deployed against specific targets, Nargothrond, the Nerneath Arnoediad, in the context of specific campaigns that served Morgoth's strategic objectives. Smaug is not a weapon. Smaug has no master. Smaug serves no strategic purpose. Smaug is not deployed against anyone. Smaug deploys himself, for his own reasons, in service of his own greed. The dragon that attacks Erebor is not fulfilling a Dark Lord's command. The dragon is fulfilling his own nature. The difference is the difference between the disciplined and the feral. Glorong is the disciplined dragon, the weapon that serves the master, that operates within a strategic framework, that understands its role in a larger campaign. Smaug is the feral dragon, the uncontrolled predator, the being whose behavior is driven entirely by internal impulse, who attacks because the greed says attack, and who hoards because the greed says hoard. The feral dragon is more dangerous than the disciplined dragon. The disciplined dragon has a master, and the master can be defeated. Defeat the master, and the weapon loses its direction. The feral dragon has no master. The feral dragon cannot be defeated by defeating a master who does not exist. The feral dragon must be confronted directly, must be fought on its own terms, in its own lair, with the specific quality of courage and cleverness that direct confrontation with an autonomous evil requires. Glorong was defeated by Trin, defeated through deception, through the specific quality of the hero's cunning applied to the dragon's vulnerabilities. Smaug is defeated by Bard, defeated through information, through the specific quality of collaborative intelligence gathering that identifies the vulnerability and communicates it to the being who can exploit it. The evolution from Glorong to Smaug, from the disciplined weapon to the feral predator, is the evolution of Morgoth's evil across the ages. The First Age evil was organized. The Third Age evil is scattered. The First Age had the Dark Lord directing the dragons against specific targets. The Third Age has the dragons operating on their own, pursuing their own greed, serving no master except the nature that the Dark Lord bred into them. Part 35. The desolation recovers. After Smaug's death, the desolation heals, slowly, not overnight, not in a single season, over years and decades. The poisoned soil gradually recovers its fertility. The dead trees are replaced by new growth. The specific, dragon-produced quality of anti-life that radiated from the mountain gradually fades. The recovery is the narrative statement about resilience. The dragon's presence poisoned the landscape. The dragon's absence allows the landscape to recover. The natural world, once freed from the dragon's influence, reasserts itself, grows back into the spaces that the dragon's presence had killed. The recovery mirrors the recovery of the peoples. Dale is rebuilt. Laketown is rebuilt. The men of the region, like the landscape, recover from the dragon's presence, rebuild what was destroyed, replant what was burned, restore the specific quality of human civilization that the dragon disrupted. The recovery takes time. The landscape does not snap back. The peoples do not instantly resume their pre-dragon lives. The recovery is gradual, effortful, and marked by the specific quality of scars that catastrophe leaves. The rebuilt Dale is not the same as the original Dale. The replanted landscape is not the same as the pre-dragon landscape. The recovery is real but imperfect, marked by the memory of the destruction even as the destruction is repaired. The desolation's recovery is the natural world's answer to the dragon's anti-life. The dragon produced death. The natural world produces life. The natural world is patient, is willing to wait decades for the opportunity to recover, and the patience applied across enough time overcomes the dragon's influence. The recovery is also the narrative's answer to the philosophical question that the dragon poses: is destruction permanent? Can evil permanently alter the world? Can the dragon's 2 centuries of presence irrevocably damage the landscape? The answer is no. The answer is that the natural world recovers, that the damage, though real, is not permanent, that the patience of growing things outlasts the violence of burning things, that the life that the dragon's presence suppressed reasserts itself when the dragon's presence is removed. Part 36. What Bilbo learned. Bilbo Baggins enters the quest as a hobbit. Bilbo exits the quest as a hero, but a specific kind of hero. Not the kind that kills dragons. Not the kind that wins battles. The kind that learns. What Bilbo learns from the dragon is the most important education in the entire Hobbit, and the education consists of 2 lessons. Lesson 1. Evil is intelligent. Evil is not stupid. Evil is not clumsy. Evil is not the bumbling, incompetent, easily outwitted quality that fairy tale villains display. Evil, in the form of Smaug, is brilliantly intelligent, is capable of psychological manipulation, strategic assessment, and the specific quality of devastating insight that sees the truth about the beings it encounters. The dragon sees Bilbo more clearly than Bilbo sees himself. The dragon identifies the Hobbit's anxieties, the Hobbit's doubts, the Hobbit's specific vulnerabilities. The dragon's psychological assessment of Bilbo is more accurate than the Hobbit's self-assessment. The dragon knows what the Hobbit fears before the Hobbit knows. Lesson 2. Evil can be right. The dragon's predictions about the treasure, the predictions about Thorin's dragon sickness, about the conflict between the claimants, about the specific greed-driven quality of the post-dragon struggle, those predictions come true. The dragon is right about what will happen. The dragon's intelligence, applied to the specific domain of predicting the effects of gold on mortal beings, produces accurate predictions. The combination of the 2 lessons, evil is intelligent, evil can be right, is the education that transforms Bilbo from a provincial innocent into a being of moral sophistication. The hobbit who enters the mountain does not know that evil can be smart. The hobbit who exits the mountain knows. And the knowledge, the specific, dragon-taught awareness that evil is not only dangerous but perceptive, is the knowledge that Bilbo carries back to the Shire, and that prepares Bilbo for the later, greater encounter with evil that the ring represents. The dragon teaches the hobbit. Not deliberately, the dragon is not trying to educate Bilbo. The dragon is trying to manipulate Bilbo. But the manipulation, survived and reflected on, becomes education. The hobbit who survives the dragon's manipulation learns the dragon's methods, learns how evil operates, how evil persuades, how evil uses truth as a weapon. Part 37. The Lake and the Dragon. The Long Lake receives Smaug's body. The dragon, killed by Bard's arrow, falls into the lake and sinks. The body, the vast-scaled, fire-drained body, lies on the lake's bottom. The lake becomes the dragon's grave. The lake burial is the opposite of the mountain burial. In the mountain, the dragon was elevated, was on top, was above, was in the position of supremacy that the dragon's nature demanded. In the lake, the dragon is submerged, is below, is beneath, is in the position of submission that the dragon's nature refused. The water extinguishes the fire. The lake, the specific, aquatic, fire-quenching quality of the water, is the natural enemy of the dragon's primary weapon. The fire that destroyed Dale and burned Lake Town and reduced the landscape to the desolation. That fire is permanently quenched by the water that receives the dragon's body. The lake burial is permanent. The dragon's body remains in the lake. The specific, physical, materially present remains of the most dangerous creature in the Third Age lie beneath the water that the men of the lake fish and the traders cross. The dragon's body is there, is a permanent feature of the lake's ecology. A presence beneath the surface that the surface dwellers know about but do not see. The dragon's bones are said to be visible for centuries. The lake is not deep enough to conceal the dragon entirely. The bones, the vast, skeletal, archaeologically significant remains of a great fire drake, are visible beneath the water to anyone who looks down from a boat. The bones are the reminder. The permanent, physical, materially present reminder that the dragon was here. That the dragon was real. That the specific, overwhelming, fire-breathing, city-destroying quality of the dragon's existence was not a myth, but a fact. The bones in the lake are the Smaug story's final image in the landscape, the dragon, reduced from terror to skeleton, lying in the water that quenched its fire, visible to the peoples who rebuilt the world that the dragon destroyed. Part 38. The Arkenstone Problem. The Arkenstone is the treasure's treasure, the most valuable object in the most valuable hoard in Middle-earth. And the Arkenstone's role in the Smaug story is the role of the catalyst that reveals the dragon sickness's mechanism. The Arkenstone drives Thorin mad, not literally, not in the clinical medical sense of madness. In the mythological sense, the Arkenstone produces in Thorin the specific, possessive, all-consuming quality of desire that mirrors the dragon's relationship with the Horde. Thorin wants the Arkenstone the way Smaug wants the gold, totally, exclusively, with the specific quality of mine, not yours, that the dragon sickness produces. The Arkenstone is the dragon sickness in gem form. The gem concentrates the sickness, focuses it, intensifies it, gives it a single, beautiful, luminous object to fix on. The dragon sickness, which in its diffuse form is a general obsession with the Horde, becomes in its concentrated form a specific obsession with the gem. Bilbo possesses the Arkenstone. The Hobbit finds the gem in the Horde and keeps it. Keeps it hidden from Thorin, keeps it in his pocket, carries it through the final stages of the quest without telling anyone. The keeping is not greed. The keeping is instinct. The Hobbit's instinct that the gem is important, that the gem will be needed, that the gem's possession will provide the Hobbit with a leverage that the Hobbit cannot yet define, but that the Hobbit's moral sense tells him will be essential. The instinct is correct. The Arkenstone becomes the bargaining chip. The gem that Thorin wants above all things is the gem that Bilbo gives to Thorin's opponents. The gem that the Hobbit surrenders in exchange for the possibility of peace. The Hobbit's possession of the gem is the Hobbit's power, the specific, gem-derived, dragon sickness exploiting power that allows the Hobbit to force negotiations that the dragon sickness would otherwise prevent. The Arkenstone's journey from the depths of Erebor to the dragon's hoard, to Bilbo's pocket, to Bard's hands, back to Erebor, on Thorin's breast, is the Smaug story's most compact narrative. The gem moves. The gem produces effects. The gem's movement through the story produces the specific, cascading, domino-quality chain of consequences that drives the narrative's final act. The Arkenstone is the miniature dragon, the small, beautiful, luminous version of the same quality that the dragon embodies. The quality of desirability that produces the quality of possessiveness, that produces the quality of conflict. The gem and the dragon are the same thing at different scales. The dragon hoards the gold. The gem hoards the desire. Both produce the same result, the specific, destructive, relationship-destroying quality of wanting something so much that the wanting consumes everything else. Part 39. What Smaug feared. Let me talk about the dragon's fear, because the dragon's fear is the most revealing dimension of the dragon's psychology. Smaug fears nothing that we see. The dragon, in his conversation with Bilbo, displays no fear, no anxiety about the dwarves, no concern about the armies of men, no worry about any of the military forces that the free peoples could assemble against him. But Smaug guards the treasure. Guards it with the paranoid, hyper-vigilant, Every coin counted quality of a being who is afraid of losing the thing he possesses. The guarding is the fear, the obsessive awareness of every piece of the hoard, the instant detection of the missing cup, the rage that the theft produces. This is not confidence. This is fear. The specific quality of fear that the possessor feels toward the possibility of dispossession. Smaug fears loss. Not death, the dragon does not appear to fear death. Not combat, the dragon is eager for combat, is excited by the prospect of burning Lake Town, is energized by the specific quality of destruction that combat provides. The dragon fears loss, fears the loss of the treasure, fears the specific, nightmarish, worst-case scenario of the hoarder, someone taking the gold. The fear is the greed's shadow. The greed says, mine. The fear says, someone will take it. The two impulses, the possessive and the paranoid, are the two halves of the dragon's psychology, and the two halves are inseparable. The dragon hoards because the dragon wants. The dragon guards because the dragon fears. The fear makes the dragon vulnerable. The paranoia, which is supposed to protect the hoard, also constrains the dragon's strategic thinking. The dragon's response to the theft of the cup is not strategic, is not the calculated, risk-assessed, optimal response that the dragon's intelligence could produce. The response is emotional. The response is rage. The specific quality of how dare you. I will burn everything fury that the fear of loss produces. The rage drives the dragon out of the mountain. The rage drives the dragon to attack Lake Town. The rage drives the dragon to expose himself, to fly in the open, to circle above a populated area, to present his belly to the archers below. The rage that the fear produces is the mechanism that creates the opportunity for the killing. Smaug dies because Smaug is afraid. The fear produces the rage. The rage produces the recklessness. The recklessness produces the exposure. The exposure produces the death. The chain runs from the fear through the rage to the arrow, the chain that begins with the dragon's deepest anxiety and ends with the dragon's destruction. Part 40. The world without dragons. Smaug's death creates a world without great dragons. The Third Age, after Smaug, is a world in which the most devastating weapon of the First Age has been permanently removed from the strategic equation. The removal changes everything. The free peoples of the North, who have lived for centuries under the shadow of the dragon, who have arranged their settlements, their economies, their military strategies around the presence of the fire drake in the mountain, those peoples are now free. Free from the fear. Free from the desolation. Free from the specific quality of constrained by dragon's presence that has defined the northern lands for 2 centuries. The freedom is disorienting. The peoples have organized their lives around the dragon for so long that the dragon's absence creates a vacuum, a specific, structural. We don't know how to live without the threat quality of uncertainty that the immediate post-dragon period produces. Lake Town has been defined by its relationship to the dragon, built on water because water does not burn, positioned far from the mountain because distance is safety. Without the dragon, the reasons for Lake Town's specific, aquatic, distant from the mountain quality of habitation are no longer valid. The town can be rebuilt on land. The town can be built closer to the mountain. The constraints that the dragon imposed on the town's location and design are lifted. Dale can be rebuilt. The city that the dragon destroyed can be reconstructed, not as a memory of what was lost, but as a new creation, informed by the memory, but not constrained by it. Dale after Smaug is not the same as Dale before Smaug. Dale after Smaug is a city that knows what a dragon can do and that builds with the knowledge incorporated into the design. The world without dragons is a world that remembers dragons. The dragon is gone. The fear of the dragon persists. The specific quality of we know what can happen that the dragon's presence produced is not eliminated by the dragon's death. The fear outlasts the cause. The memory outlasts the event. The world without dragons is shaped by the memory of dragons, and the memory, the specific, cultural, institutionally preserved memory of what a fire drake can do to a mountain kingdom and a trading town, is the dragon's most lasting legacy. Part 41. Smaug and the One Ring. The connection between Smaug and the One Ring is the connection that links the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, the specific, narrative, causally connected thread that makes the smaller story the prologue to the larger story. The ring was found during the quest for Erebor. The ring's discovery was made possible by the quest's existence. The quest's existence was made necessary by the dragon's occupation of the mountain. The dragon, therefore, is the indirect cause of the ring's discovery. The being whose presence in the mountain produced the chain of events that brought a hobbit to the mountains, and the mountain's depths to the hobbit. The irony is precise. Morgoth's creation inadvertently enables the discovery of Sauron's weapon, the Rin. The first Dark Lord's handiwork produces the circumstances that expose the second Dark Lord's instrument. The dragon, sitting in the mountain, unable to leave, unable to change, is the immovable obstacle whose presence sets in motion the events that will eventually destroy the power that created the dragon's kind. The ring and the dragon share qualities. Both are products of evil. Both corrupt their possessors. Both produce the specific quality of obsessive, possessive, sanity-destroying desire that the mythology identifies as the dragon sickness. The ring sickness and the dragon sickness are the same sickness, the same pathological desire for a thing that corrupts the desirer. Bilbo carries the ring out of the mountains. Bilbo carries the ring through the dragon's lair. Bilbo carries the ring in his pocket while he talks to Smaug, carries the Dark Lord's weapon in the presence of the Dark Lord's master's creation. And neither the ring nor the dragon recognizes the other's significance. The invisibility that the ring provides is the tool that allows Bilbo to survive the dragon. The ring makes Bilbo invisible. The invisibility allows Bilbo to enter the dragon's chamber undetected, to observe the dragon's belly, to discover the bare patch that will eventually kill the dragon. The ring, Sauron's weapon, the instrument of the Dark Lord's will, is the tool that enables the destruction of Morgoth's weapon, the dragon. The tools of evil are used against each other. The ring against the dragon against the ring's secrecy by setting in motion the quest that discovers the ring. The instruments of the two Dark Lords, never designed to work in concert and never aware of each other's significance, are deployed by the free peoples in a chain of events that ultimately destroys both. Part 42. The dragon in the culture. Smaug has become one of the most iconic dragons in literary history, perhaps the most iconic. The dragon has transcended the specific Tolkien-created mythology and become a cultural figure, a symbol, a reference point, an archetype that subsequent fantasy literature measures its own dragons against. The iconography is specific: the vast body on the gold, the conversation in the dark, the bare patch in the armor, the fall into the lake. These images are culturally embedded, are present in the collective imagination of the fantasy reading public, recognized and referenced and drawn upon by every subsequent dragon story. The cultural presence of Smaug is the dragon's immortality. The physical dragon is dead, killed by Bard's arrow, lying in the Long Lake's bottom. The cultural dragon is alive, is present in every subsequent dragon narrative, in every fantasy story that features a treasure-hoarding, riddle-speaking, vanity-driven fire drake. Tolkien created the template. The template is, the dragon is intelligent. The dragon talks. The dragon has a personality, a specific, individual, recognizable quality of character that makes the dragon more than a monster. The dragon is a person, an evil person, an alien person, but a person, a being with motivations, anxieties, vanities, and the specific quality of selfhood that makes the dragon's death a meaningful event rather than a simple pest removal. Before Tolkien, dragons in Western literature were largely monsters, obstacles to be overcome, threats to be neutralized, the specific quality of mindless, instinct-driven danger that the hero proves himself against by defeating. After Tolkien, dragons are characters. The shift from monster to character, from obstacle to person, is Smaug's most lasting cultural contribution. Part 43. The Hobbit and the Dragon. The relationship between Bilbo and Smaug is the core relationship of The Hobbit, more central than Bilbo's relationship with the Dwarves, more defining than Bilbo's relationship with the Ring, more revealing than Bilbo's relationship with any other character. The Hobbit and the Dragon are the story's two poles, the smallest and the largest, the most humble and the most proud, the most generous and the most hoarding. The Hobbit who wants nothing from the treasure, and the dragon who wants everything from the treasure. The two beings occupy opposite ends of every spectrum that the narrative constructs, and the tension between the two poles is the story's engine. Bilbo defeats Smaug. Not physically. Bilbo does not kill the dragon. Bilbo does not wound the dragon. Bilbo does not even harm the dragon. Bilbo defeats the dragon through observation. Through the specific quality of careful, attentive, detail-noticing perception that the Hobbit brings to the encounter, and that the dragon, for all his intelligence, does not expect. The Hobbit sees the bare patch. The Hobbit notices the vulnerability. The Hobbit carries the information out of the mountain and into the chain of transmission that delivers it to the archer. The Hobbit defeats the dragon not through strength, but through sight, through the specific Hobbit quality of paying attention to small things that the dragon's vast, strategic, big-picture intelligence does not consider a threat. The defeat is thematic. The smallest defeats the largest. The humblest defeats the proudest. The being who wants nothing defeats the being who wants everything. The poles reverse. The tension resolves. The Hobbit, who is supposed to be the dragon's victim, becomes the dragon's destroyer, not through power, but through perception. The thematic reversal is Tolkien's deepest statement in The Hobbit. The greatest threats are not defeated by the greatest powers. The greatest threats are defeated by the specific, small, easily overlooked qualities that the great powers do not recognize as threats. The dragon is defeated by a hobbit's eyes. The most devastating creature in the Third Age is brought down by a detail that a small person noticed in the dark. Part 44. What Erebor means after Smaug. Erebor after Smaug is a different kind of kingdom. The mountain is the same. The treasure is the same. But the meaning of the place has been permanently altered by the 2 centuries of dragon occupation. Erebor before Smaug was a symbol of dwarvish achievement, the greatest kingdom, the finest craft, the most magnificent halls. Erebor was what dwarves could build when they were at their best, the physical expression of dwarvish culture at its peak. Erebor after Smaug is a symbol of dwarvish resilience, the kingdom that was lost and reclaimed, the mountain that was taken by a dragon and taken back by a company of 13 dwarves, a wizard and a hobbit. Erebor after Smaug is not the symbol of achievement. It is the symbol of endurance, of the specific, dwarvish, nothing keeps us down quality that makes the dwarves one of the most admirable peoples in Tolkien's mythology. The shift from achievement to endurance is the dragon's cultural legacy. Smaug transformed the meaning of the mountain, transformed the story that the dwarves tell about themselves. The dwarves before Smaug said, "Look what we built." The dwarves after Smaug say, "Look what we survived." Both stories are true. Both stories are important. But the second story, the endurance story, the survival story, the we lost everything and came back story, is the story that carries more emotional weight, more cultural significance, more of the specific quality of narrative power that shapes a people's identity across generations. Smaug gave the dwarves their greatest story. Not intentionally, the dragon did not intend to provide narrative. But the dragon's occupation of Erebor, the exile it produced, the quest it motivated, and the battle it generated, all of this, taken together, is the greatest story that the dwarves of Durin's folk possess. The story of the dragon is the dwarves' defining narrative. Part 44b. The silence after the dragon. There is a quality to the world after Smaug that deserves specific attention, because the quality is the thing that makes the dragon's story feel finished in a way that other villain stories do not. After Smaug dies, the world is quieter. Not literally. The Battle of Five Armies is loud, and the rebuilding is noisy, and the commerce that flows through the restored Erebor corridor is as bustling as any commerce has ever been. But the quality of the world is quieter. The specific, atmospheric, felt in the bones quality of menace that the dragon's presence produced. The quality that made the northern lands feel watched, feel threatened, feel like a territory where something vast and terrible was sleeping and might wake at any moment. That quality is gone. The silence is the dragon's absence made atmospheric. The dragon is no longer sleeping in the mountain. The fire is no longer banked in the dark. The vast, gold-counting cup missing, detecting awareness, is no longer monitoring the treasure. The specific quality of dread that the dragon's existence maintained, the dread that Laketown felt, that Dale's survivors carried, that the dwarves of Erebor never forgot, the dread is over. The peoples of the north have to learn to live without the dread. The communities that organized their lives around the dragon, that built on water because of the dragon, that traded in low capital goods because of the dragon, that maintained escape routes and emergency preparations because of the dragon, those communities must now reorganize, must learn to build on land, must learn to invest in permanent infrastructure, must learn the specific, unfamiliar, almost disorienting quality of living without the threat that has defined their existence for 2 centuries. The silence is freedom. The silence is also loss, the loss of the organizing principle, the loss of the thing to fear that gave the community's preparedness its purpose and the community's solidarity its foundation. A community defined by shared dread loses its definition when the dread is removed. The removal is liberation. The removal is also disorientation. The peoples adapt. The peoples always adapt. But the adaptation, the slow, generational, institution by institution process of rebuilding a culture around something other than fear takes time, takes decades, takes the specific quality of patient, unglamorous, nobody writes songs about it work that converts a post-catastrophe community into a thriving community. The silence after the dragon is the sound of normalcy returning. Normalcy is quieter than catastrophe. Normalcy is less dramatic than dragonfire. Normalcy is the specific, unheroic, deeply valuable quality of ordinary life that the dragon's presence prevented and that the dragon's death makes possible again. The silence is the dragon's greatest gift, not the treasure. The treasure was the dwarves to begin with. The silence, the absence of the dread, the removal of the fire from the mountain and the fear from the air, the specific, atmospheric, felt in the bones quality of we are safe now, that the dragon's death produces, and that the peoples of the north will spend generations learning to inhabit. Part 45. The fire goes out. Here is the image I want to leave you with. The long lake, night, the water still. The fires of Laketown dying, the last embers of the buildings that the dragon burned, the last orange glow fading from the surface of the water. Beneath the surface, Smaug. The vast body sinking, the fire in the belly finally extinguished. The scales that glittered like 1,000 diamonds in the firelight are dark now, are just scales, just armor, just the protective covering of a being that no longer needs protection. The dragon's eyes are open. The eyes that burned like furnaces are dark. The eyes that saw every piece of the hoard, that counted every coin, that detected the missing cup from a treasury of millions, those eyes see nothing now. The water fills them. The darkness covers them. The specific, terrifying quality of the dragon's gaze, the gaze that made Bilbo tremble, that made Laketown burn, that made the world smaller because the dragon's eyes were watching. That gaze is extinguished. The fire goes out. The fire that Morgoth bred into the dragons of the First Age. The fire that burned through Glorong, through Ancalagon, through the long lineage of fire drakes that carried the Dark Lord's destruction across the ages. That fire goes out in the cold water of the Long Lake. No more fire. No more dragons. The last of the great fire drakes is dead, and the fire that has been burning since the pits of Angband is finally, permanently, irrevocably out. The water closes over the dragon. The lake is still. The night is dark. And in the Shire, hundreds of miles away, unaware of the dragon's death, unaware of the arrow and the lake and the fire going out, a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins sits in Bag End with a small gold ring in his pocket, and a story to tell and no idea that the ring is more dangerous than the dragon ever was. The fire goes out. The darkness begins. That is the full story of Smaug. From the withered heath to the long lake, from the breeding pits of Morgoth to the cold water of the northern mere. The last great fire drake, the desolation of the north, the dragon who sat on the gold and counted the coins and talked to a hobbit in the dark and died because the hobbit noticed the one thing the dragon could not see about himself. The greatest monster in the Third Age brought down by the smallest person in the room. That is the story. The fire and the arrow. The gold and the greed. The dragon and the hobbit. Stay with us. The mountain goes deeper than the treasury. And we are not done digging yet.